you. Of recess. Welcome to the Oscoda Township regular board meeting for June 25th, 2018. We've already done our roll call, call to order, pledge of allegiance, and a closed session. We're now into agenda additions. First one I have is that there's a correction to our agenda that we need to remove the closed session notice at the end of our agenda, which was left in there by mistake. Are there any other agenda additions?
Could we move one of the items ahead of the bill paying? That'd be the MIC TV contract.
I thought maybe we would, I didn't know what item that Bill's talking about, and I thought we would just pull it out of the consent agenda and add it to where it's at on the agenda. And approve the consent agenda where it's at.
Okay, so we approve payment of bills
Without the
without
MIC
TV invoices getting paid.
and address it on the agenda where it's at.
And then at item H, MIC TV contract, we'll go through the contract. If that's approved, then we go have an action for the payment of the MIC TV invoices.
Correct.
That's fine.
Okay. Any other agenda additions?
Just might mention to the board, I don't know if we want to formally act on it, but under informational at the bottom, it says resolution number 2018-11, appointment of civil infraction officer, with language repealing all previous appointments. What with the confusion we had with resolution numbers last time, that is, the board made that 2018-12 at the last meeting, so for the purposes of this agenda, that's actually what it's referencing. It's a minor change, but...
All right. Anything else? All right, then I need the motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda with changes mentioned.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Palmer. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? The agenda is set. Next is our audit presentation for 2017.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jamie Crothers. I work for Stevenson & Company, and we perform your annual financial audit. When we come out to do your audit, there's two parts to our audit. We audit the numbers to make sure that they are materially correct. And then we also look at your internal controls or checks and balances and report on any findings that we might find. I'm going to start out by talking about your year-end figures. We'll focus on what's considered your major funds here at the township. There's a calculation that we do based upon audit standards that tell us what those funds are, so we will talk about those tonight. I do have a handout that I passed out before the meeting, and that's what I will focus on tonight. You also have your audit reports there as well. Those are quite lengthy, so we won't go over everything in there tonight, but if you have questions from when you looked at it prior, or if you have questions in the future, I'd be happy to answer them either tonight, or you can contact me at my office. Jamie and Jen both have my cell phone number. If I'm not in the office, my email. I'd be happy to answer any questions that come up at a later date. So to focus on the handout, the township received an unmodified opinion. So what that means is that's the best opinion available. So we audited these numbers, and we believe that these numbers in your audit report are materially correct. So you can rely on those. To start out with your general fund ended the year with approximately $1.76 million in cash. That's an increase of approximately $64,000 from the year before. Your general fund had total assets of $3.4 million. That includes the cash mentioned above. It includes $1.4 million in taxes levied in December of 2017 for use in 2018. It includes $103,000 that's due from the state. The big portion of that is your state shared revenue that was due from the state at year end of about $94,000. To offset your assets, your township general fund had $1.6 million in liabilities and deferred inflows. $94,000 of that is accounts payable, so that is your bills or invoices that are paid in January 2018 or beyond for 2017 services or goods that were received due to timing differences. He has approximately $77,000 in accrued payroll or withholdings and MERS payments. So that's benefits and wages that were earned in December, but due to timing issues are paid out in January. And then the large number there is $1.4 million in deferred inflow. And what that is, it's an offset to your taxes receivable. So you have your December 2017 levy, and since that's a lien on the property as of year end, there's a receivable for that. But the way your levy is set up, it's for use in 2018. So we offset that. So it's owed to you, but really we don't recognize it in revenue until the next year due to accounting standards. Your general fund revenues totaled approximately $3 million, and your expenditures totaled almost $3.3 million. Revenues increased approximately $445,000. That is mainly due to a state grant increase, and that's your trust fund grant for the acquisition of that beachfront property. And those expenditures increased about $509,000, and again, those offset each other. That's directly related to the purchase of that property as well. Your general fund had transfers in from your Old Orchard Park fund of $200,000. That's a decrease of $181,000 from the year before, and that's mainly, again, due to the beach park property acquisition. So you decreased your transfer from the Old Orchard Park because of that. Your property operation and maintenance transferred $51,000, and your water fund transferred $85,000 to your general fund. So those were the funds that transferred in money to your general fund. Your general fund subsidized your road improvement fund by approximately $37,000 for different projects this year. So general fund ended the year with a fund balance of $1.77 million. That increased slightly by about $16,000 or 1% from the year before. Your fund balance is at 54% of your current year expenditures, which is a healthy fund balance. A very healthy fund balance in this recent economic times. So what that means is if your standard operating revenues and expenditures remain consistent, and there was an excess of expenditures over revenue before taking into account your transfers. So before taking into account that transfer in from your Old Orchard Park fund mainly, you had a $286,000 loss in your general fund. Revenues and expenses remained pretty consistent. Your next major fund that I want to talk about is your property operation and maintenance fund. You had almost $2.9 million in cash. That's an increase of about $460,000 from the year before. Your fund balance was approximately $2.8 million at year end, and that increase of $461,000 is largely due to the sale of the building 401 that happened in 2017. The next fund I want to talk about is your sewer disposal system fund. You had unrestricted cash of about $683,000 at year end. That was a decrease of $327,000 from 2016. You have total assets of $5.9 million. But that also includes infrastructure of $4.3 million, so your actual sewer system, your buildings and sewer system. Almost $2.4 million of that was your wastewater treatment plant improvement project that was completed in 2016, so that's a large part of those assets there. Your assets are offset by liabilities of approximately $3.5 million. The big part of those liabilities is $3.4 million in bonds payable. So the debt that was issued to perform that project with the wastewater treatment plant. Overall, your sewer had a net increase in net position of $135,000 this year. Your water fund has unrestricted cash of approximately $1.3 million. Total assets of $9.5 million, but again, that includes your water infrastructure, your water lines, and also your investment in Huron Shore Regional Utility Authority, which is approximately $7.9 million. So that's the money that you've invested in Huron Shore over the years to use their right to capacity of their system. So that's a big part of that number. Your water fund had an increase in net position of approximately $37,000 for 2017. Your Old Orchard Park fund had $372,000 in cash at year end, had an operating income of $307,000, And once again, the Old Orchard Park Fund was able to subsidize your general fund through a transfer of $200,000 this year. Your Health and Community Center Fund is not considered a major fund, but it's a fund that I know township officials have been interested in hearing how it's doing in the past, so I wanted to talk about that tonight as well. Your cash at year end in that fund is approximately $64,000. The fund had an operating loss of $73,000. Your property operation and maintenance fund subsidized the fund by transferring in $42,000. The overall loss after that transfer was approximately $30,000. Something that I did want to point out is that these loss numbers include depreciation expense, which is a non-cash expense, but it represents the wear and tear on the community center's assets, and that's a $34,000. So your loss, if you had no depreciation expense and no transfers from other funds, would be approximately $38,000. So that's an overview of your major funds here at the township. Another number that I think warrants some discussion tonight is what's considered your GASB 68 calculations, and what that means in non-accounting terms is that there was a significant change 2 years ago, and that was related to your defined benefit pension plan, which currently your police employees are under. And for the first time 2 years ago, your governments had to recognize the unfunded portion of your pension as a liability. I did put the page number on there if you wanted to look at your actual audit report to see that liability, but I put the number here as well. It's almost 1.5 million. Some good news is that it did decrease from 2016. It has decreased 367,000. And that's due to changes in benefits that were made in the last union contract, as well as increased returns on MERS investments. The investments are starting to make a little gain there. Yeah. So it's a very simple concept, but in true accounting fashion, there's some complicated calculations that go along with it. But basically, it's the difference between what the actuaries estimate that your future benefit payments are going to be, what your liability is, and what you already have set aside in trust at MERS. So that is the difference. The change in this added several footnotes. I did put the numbers on there, the page numbers, if you wanted to look at the actual pension numbers there. Something that I wanted to point out, and I talked to David about this in the exit conference, is that the township must now file a new form with the state of Michigan, and that is Form 5572, and it's the Retirement System Annual Report. That's the first year that this will be due. And it's with Michigan Department of Treasury regarding pension. And so a corrective action plan would be required with the state if your funding was below 60% and more than 10% of your governmental revenue. I'm happy to say that you are 65% funded, so the state's not going to require any corrective action plan at this point, but it's just something to point out that if you do fall below that number, you will have to submit a corrective action plan. And just a reminder that that form needs to be filed for the first time this year.
And that form is due when?
July 2nd. So.
Next Monday?
Yes. Yes. And I can assist David with that. We've talked about it, okay. And I don't foresee any issues with getting that filed on time. Okay. So that was an overview of the financial figures. So the next part of our audit is going over the internal controls. So when we're out at the audit, we spend a significant amount of time going through policies and procedures and looking at checks and balances that the township has in place to protect its assets. So we have 5 findings in the current year. I'll go through each of those, and the first one I want to talk about is the financial statement preparation controls. This is a repeat comment. This is a comment that 100% of my governmental clients have. I wanted to point that out. The accounting standards, unfortunately, and the auditing standards apply to governments no matter what size that they are, and what this comment is saying is that here at the township, with your annual report and your annual financial statements, we as your auditors assist you in preparing that. It is allowed under the standards. It's just that the board needs to be aware that we assisted you with this. This wasn't completely prepared internally. So the second comment is a lack of controls over the utility billing process. This is a new comment. There was a similar comment in the prior year, but we added to this comment, so I considered it a new comment. At the township, when we came out to do the audit, we realized that there is a significant lack of internal controls or checks and balances over the utility billing process. I think, as you're well aware as a board, that there were several errors in the process in 2017. Along with the errors, if there's no checks and balances or internal controls over this process, the township also increases their risk that there could be some misappropriation due to fraud in this process. So it's very important that some checks and balances get put into this process. I wanted to point out we did not see any fraud when we were doing the audit, but there certainly is an increased risk without oversight of this process. So when we were out there doing the audit, we realized that there was little to no oversight over the utility billing process other than the individual that's actually performing all the work. In the past, the former township clerk had some oversight over the process in the form of reviewing utility billing registers. In the past, that made sense. As I don't know if everyone knows this, but the former township clerk had done the utility billing job before she was clerk, so she had a good understanding of the process, so it made sense for her to do that. With the change in elected positions, once she was no longer the clerk, it's my understanding that this process went by the wayside. So we have some recommendations in this area. Our first one is that we think that the township board and officials need to work together and come up with a policy and a procedure for how this oversight is going to be done. I think it shouldn't just be let's implement what was done before. I think we need to take into account, with the change of position, there's also a change in experience in that area, and really need to look at what makes most sense. And as far as the review process, I think that there needs to be some training for whoever this individual is that will review over this process. If it's someone that's going to review the process but has no experience and has no training and what to look for, just skimming over and doing the review is really not going to be useful. And then we think that you should implement some procedures for identifying errors in the system before you bill your customers. And they have to come in and utility billing adjustments have to be made. There are some reports in the system that we have identified, and we've communicated that to the township here, some reports that can help assist with that process and hopefully identify some of those mistakes before they go out. We'd be happy to be a part of the discussion on developing these procedures and policies and give our recommendations as far as what should be done, but ultimately the decision on the policy and the procedure is yours as the township board. So the next comment is the signature requirements for checks. This is a repeat comment as well. The Michigan Department of Treasury requires 2 signatures for all checks except the tax collection account. And the Department of Treasury requires that those signatures be one from the clerk's office and one from the treasurer's office. I want to point out that all checks that we examined did have 2 signatures. There were just times where there were 2 signatures on the check that were from the treasurer's office. And we recommend that you follow the state's guidelines and one be from the clerk's office and one be from the treasurer's office. The next comment that I wanted to talk about is the internal control over financial software applications. So internal controls are not only important for manual processes, but also important for your financial software process as well. When we came out to do the audit, we looked at several of your key financial software modules. And what we did was worked with Jamie, she's the administrator on the financial software, and BSNA, the company that runs your financial software, and pulled some reports out of the system that showed who had access to what modules and what kind of access they had. Based on those reports, we were able to make several recommendations on users that should be eliminated and access that should be changed from editable access, so able to make changes into that system, to read-only, where they'd only be able to view that. Our main issue with this, it wasn't the only, but the most important one that we saw was in the utility billing again. The utility billing module, there was individuals in the treasurer's office that had access to make utility billing adjustments. And for those of you who've been on the board for a while, you may remember, and this may be new to some of you, but in years past we had a comment for the segregation of duties. And what that means is, there are certain processes in the accounting software that should be done by separate individuals. And in the past, when the utility billing process was included in the treasurer's office, we always had a comment that said you have an internal control material weakness, because individuals that are able to collect cash shouldn't also be able to make utility billing adjustments and be doing the utility billing. So the township was proactive and took our recommendation and moved utility billing out of the treasurer's office, so they're no longer collecting cash. However, if the individuals in the treasurer's office have the opportunity to make utility billing adjustments, they don't truly have that segregation of duties anymore. I'm happy to report that as soon as we gave Jamie those recommendations, those changes were made immediately. So to the best of my knowledge, those are still, those recommendations are still implemented, and that's no longer an issue. The last comment that we had for you was the use of interfund loans in lieu of reimbursement of expenses. This is a new comment, but this is not a new issue to the township. For several years, the township has used interfund loan accounts to correct errors in charging expenditures to funds, or to allocate expenditures to several funds. So this method, when you do this, what it results in is the expenditure has been shown in the proper fund and it matches your budget, but what is happening is you're moving the expense between the funds, but you're setting up these interfund loans, so the cash really isn't ever moving. So say, for example, an expense was supposed to be in the general fund and it incorrectly got charged to the sewer fund. If you use these interfund loan accounts, the expense got moved to the proper fund, but the cash never moved and followed it. So the expense is in the right fund, but if you were to look at your actual cash balances within the fund, they're really not accurate, because they're accurate in total, but it looks like the fund that that made the loan has more cash than it really should. So that wasn't the intent of those. I did want to point out that we have made corrections to these through audit adjustments for several years, but there are still some that remain. So we recommend that these interfund loan accounts are really only used if it's a true interfund loan. So if it's truly that the sewer fund is going to loan the general fund some money for a project and charge them X amount of interest, that's when that'd be appropriate to use that account. If it's simply an expense got charged to the wrong account, or an expense was paid out of one account and you want to charge it to several funds, there's a different way to do that, and you should actually move the cash. I have worked with the township officials, and we have been cleaning those up since I gave this comment at the exit conference. They've been working on them. They've called me, asked questions. So it's my understanding that those are getting cleaned up as well as we speak. I do have something good to report. One comment from the last year. The timely distribution of tax collections for other units, we had a finding on that last year. I'd like to report that that was done properly this year. The tax account was distributed properly, and we had no issues with that in 2017. I know I gave you a lot of information tonight. Is there any questions I can answer for you right now on either the figures or any of the comments that I have presented tonight?
I have one question. In the you said most of these your comments and some of your findings are new comments. You had one, number 3 was a repeat comment. Does that mean that we're not taking care of that problem, or it has to do with the signatures?
Of the signatures. We did have that comment in 16 and 17. There are very few checks that have this issue, but once we find a comment in 1 year, we have to check for it in the next year, and we checked for it and we did find that. This year it had to do with the DDA account. So I think we figured out a way to avoid that in the future. And it's my understanding that that's not going to be done anymore.
It's been fixed.
Okay.
I thought that with the DDA board, it had to be, I didn't realize that the clerk's office could be on the checks also. So there was never, it was always Jane and I that were in the office to write the checks for the DDA, because the treasurer for the DDA isn't around that often and not easy to get a hold of. So Jane and I would just sign the check to get the expedite it, to get the bills paid for them, and didn't realize that it was a problem, so.
And then
It's been fixed.
Can we assume that when you find these, like these new comments, then in subsequent years you would review those same things again to make sure that they're-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we are required to do that.
Are you done, Mr. Palmer?
Yeah. that's
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Sorry, I can't see you.
I'm glad you like it.
Some fat guys in the way?
No. No, he was leaning back. Thanks, Mrs. Carruthers, or Ms. Carruthers. According to your firm's website, you offer a variety of business services, one of which is government services. And the one that's listed is defined as audit the highest level of assurance. Is this the service that we actually get, or any municipality that would come to your firm would get?
Yes, you are actually receiving an audit, which is the highest level of assurance. So yes, that is what you're receiving.
Very good, which explains why you were looking at the transactions and more in depth of the transactions where needed.
Correct, and you are required to have an actual audit by the state of Michigan. So regardless of whether the board wanted to do that or not, you don't have an option. The
Right,
state of Michigan
right,
says you have
You're
to.
doing it.
Fair enough, exactly right. There's there's actually a few terms in the audit itself that I just wanted to ask you, because it's not, I'd like to ask you personally as opposed to what's written in the report.
Okay.
If you could give us the definition for what you believe or what you think or use as your definition for material weakness, a significant deficiency, and one that you would put under the internal control operational efficiency category.
Absolutely. So those terms are defined by the auditing standards, actually. So a material weakness is the most severe comment, and that means that there is a reasonable possibility that something material could occur and not be detected by your internal controls.
Right.
So we believe that, there's a big enough weakness in your internal controls that something material could happen and not be caught. Significant deficiency, that's a little more lenient. That's something that the standards say it's something that we believe warrants the governing body to be aware of. So anything that we think is important enough that you should be aware of it. And then the final type of comment, that's where more of some compliance issues fall under, or things that aren't necessarily an internal control issue but aren't quite being done properly. or something that's just a little less severe.
Right. Thank you. So in this audit, we had several material weaknesses, which I think you pointed out.
Correct. Yes.
There is, within the description of lack of controls over the utility billing process, which you described earlier, you stated, quote, several billing adjustments were necessary during 2017. Could you elaborate?
Sure. I don't know that I can give you exact, but we can look it up at a later date. But what happens is, you know, your utility bills go out, and if an error is caught after the bills are processed, you can't then change your source documents, which is good, and it requires a utility billing adjustment after the fact, and that's a manual adjustment where you have to go in and say this error, now whatever that may be. It may be an error in meter reads, there might be an error with the actual meter. There's several things that can cause utility billing adjustments. We would like to see a lot of these issues caught before the bills go out, so they don't require a manual adjustment. So we have suggested some reports that maybe can assist you in identifying those.
Right.
In a perfect world, there would never be any utility billing adjustments. I don't think that will ever happen in the real world, to be honest. But I would like to see these large adjustments go away, and the number of adjustments also to be reduced significantly.
Fair enough. So, but is the term, what is the order of magnitude of these billing adjustments you found? You stated several, but was there more than several? Are we talking dozens or hundreds? What are we talking about?
I hate to give you an exact number right now tonight off the top of my head, but when I say several, I mean, you know, there are, I'm estimating right now, maybe 15, 20.
Okay.
Several small ones, not as many large ones, but there are some large ones.
Does this include the adjustments needed to correct the change in the rate change that was not executed properly?
Yes, and I guess if you want it, also the number is going to depend on, are you talking each individual bill that was adjusted, or in the general ledger when it's all put into one bill? So if you're considering every individual bill that was adjusted, then my estimate of 15 to 20 is not correct. I guess that should be clarified. I was talking adjustments that I see hitting the general ledger, but those can sometimes be summarized into one big adjustment.
Yeah, the scope on that was actually not clear from the report, so thank you. Now that does make sense, because we would probably be looking at hundreds when you're looking at that many clients or customer accounts. So, yeah, fair enough. Or what do we have, 3,000 plus accounts? So, right. Okay, so I do have a couple other questions. So just as a tee-up, I wanted to just give a little bit of information to lead into it. So every year until 2014, the township has been dinged, rightly, in our audits for not segregating the duties between treasurer's office and the utility billing clerk. It was in 2014 when the separation occurred, as you pointed out, and the utility billing clerk was moved outside the treasurer's office, and then directly under the management of the superintendent. This handled the segregation of duties problem, and the deficiency hasn't come up in our audit since. Good thing. With respect to the deficiency entitled Internal Controls over Financial Software Applications, you recommended that the township eliminate certain users, and you also recommended access of certain users be reduced to read-only. Thank you. I have I have a user access report from today at 3:26 p.m. This report shows 5 users with administrator access. One user is Mr. Stalker, whose access should be disabled at this point. 2 of these users are the clerk and deputy clerk. And the last 2 users are the utility billing clerk herself and Tammy Klein, who's the executive secretary, who has once before been a utility billing clerk and has been assisting in the training and the day-to-day operations, and is also filling in as a substitute utility billing clerk if the real one is absent. So I wanted to know if, I guess the one in my mind is like, to be an administrator of a system gives you access to pretty much carte blanche, within a system. And so I was wondering if you could tell me if the levels of access that you're hearing here is what you intended we implement when you referred to the changes earlier.
I would have to go back through my notes to see exactly on the utility billing module what recommendations we specifically made.
Right.
But I could do that and get back to you on that. I
also have those too.
With the changes?
Yeah, you could have asked me about that.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Can you give me the list again of the names?
Oh, it was Bob Stalker, and then the clerk and deputy clerk, and then what would be the utility billing clerk, which is Robin, and then Tammy Klein. So that's the 5 people.
I know that I did not recommend that Tammy be removed from that
Makes
because
sense.
of
She needs to be
her
the substitute,
position.
of course, right? Yeah, right.
That one I can tell you.
So, I guess I guess the other part of it is that, so out of the treasurer's office, they actually have even higher access. The treasurer specifically, as you mentioned, was the administrator for the system.
Correct.
With godlike access that's higher than system administrator, how do we enforce that there is indeed segregation of duties?
Well, the only thing that you can do is if you want to decide that, Jamie as treasurer is no longer going to be overall administrator of the system, that's something that you can decide. We can't decide that for you. We can tell you, hey, here's the risk that it presents. So you may consider taking that administrator duties away from Jamie if that's something you're concerned about. But then you have to decide who is going to have access to do that.
Right.
It's my understanding that Jamie has been the administrator since it was implemented.
I was, the key pusher for the BSNA system, which is why I was the person for the administrator.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that would be fine. I don't care if you do that, as long as it's somebody that's going to be in the building every day, because there's always things that come up that somebody can do it. I'd be glad to let somebody else. That's fine with me.
Right, yeah,
And it is my
sense.
understanding, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, that you in the treasurer's office have to have some editable access to the utility billing,
Right.
at
That's
least
correct.
the receiving side. So
Because-
you will
yeah.
see, when you pull those reports, there are certain things that they have to be able to do in utility billing. They shouldn't be able to make utility billing adjustments,
Right.
but you will see that they will have access to do some things just because they are receiving in their office, so keep
Right.
that
Right,
in mind.
and Tim, if you would have asked me that, probably I could have addressed it before the board meeting. There's still a couple of the modules that I'm working with to tweak to make sure that people like John have to have access to certain modules to be able to run reports only, so I have to customize those settings.
Right.
Actually, I'm working with that with Dave Schaefer also and his. I haven't removed Bob Stocker. I'll tell you that right now. I totally haven't had a chance to do that.
I don't think that's
trying to get
I don't think that
10,000
reflects on
capsules
you.
out.
No, I don't.
But,
that's fine.
no, I'm still trying to tweak some of the users for the modules because BSNA has been working with me to do that, so.
Yeah, and I don't think that, it was just a matter of, was that on the list when we were going through making the changes, so that's kind of.
I have that list in my office.
Yeah, so, now, just out of curiosity, so when you were doing the audit, were you aware that the treasurer's office had actually made adjustments directly to a customer's account last year?
Yes.
Okay, so you had found that.
Yes, and
Okay.
that's what caused us to look further into who had access to what modules.
Right, okay. And at least as of today, the deputy treasurer logged into the BSNA system at roughly 8:30 this morning and remained logged in all day into the utility billing and the general ledger with administrative access. So I don't know that that represents segregation of duties quite the way you had envisioned it.
does she have administrator access to the entire module? I guess that's what we'd have to look into closer, is to see
Right.
what she has access to do. If it's just the cash receipting side of the utility billing module, then there's no way around that, and that would still be segregation of duties. But if she has access to do anything other than take receipts in, then no, that is not what we intended. So I guess that's something that we'd have to look at closer to see what she actually has administrator rights to do.
She is one of the people with needs access to utility billing to get the certain reports run and to be able to modify the reports. So that's why she still has administrator access, because I have not been able to get with BSNA to clarify that yet. Actually, there's receipt models. It's over the counter and it has its own sign-in and login that we do that. But we do run all the receipting out of there when we go to balance the bills every day. We have to run the receipt reporting and the cash reporting out of utility billing to balance that out too. So that is a daily function.
And that's something we can discuss further, as well as, you know, this is a work in progress. You know, if you have questions like that, should we go on, that's certainly something that I can work with you on. But I think to answer your main question is, no, we're not going to get rid of the segregation of duties issue if the deputy treasurer has any rights other than to just receipt into the utility billing.
Fair enough. And finally, my last question was actually a summary point that you had in your report. So it had to do with the signature requirements for checks that was asked earlier. And you had indicated in the summary that progress had been made. It's under that progress made column. But the description of the deficiency is identically word for word from last year's report to this one. So can you describe what progress was made and how that occurred?
Yes, there's less checks that were signed by both signatures with the treasurer's office. So the comment is the same because the issue is still the same, but there was fewer number, and it was only DDA checks this year.
I see. That's it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Couple of quick ones, easy ones.
Yes.
In the past, you've always talked about unqualified, and now you've changed the word to unmodified. Should I read anything into that?
You should not. That was just a change in accounting term that the accounting standards,
Okay.
they didn't like unqualified, they changed it to unmodified.
All right.
So same result, different word.
And that's your highest category?
It is.
Okay. I was pleased to hear you say a healthy fund balance, and then you corrected yourself and said a very healthy fund balance.
It is.
And I think at this point in time, we should mention the role of our previous superintendent, Bob Stalker. I mean, he's the guy he's not the only one. Jamie's involved and the clerk's office is involved, but he's the budget guy and he's always done a great job. He should be recognized, so that's all.
I think, John, did you have questions?
No.
Oh,
I don't believe so, no.
I thought I had seen
No,
you.
just,
During the exit of your interview, you mentioned that you had to do about 75 corrections. What kind of corrections were those?
I can provide you with a list. There was several, and they resulted from many different areas. So to go through all 75 right now, I think would be a lot, and I don't have them in front of me, but that is a listing that I can provide to you. But I can tell you that, you know, they covered several different areas. You know, it wasn't just one specific area that had the majority of them.
In your booklet here, it shows here about the DDA, Downtown Development Authority. And the statement you have in here, it says the component units are legally separate from the township. How did you come to the conclusion the DDA was legally separate?
Well, DDAs, if they're set up properly, are legally separate entities through the statute that authorizes the township to set them up. I can provide you with that statute if you'd like. I know that some township officials have already asked me for that information, and I have forwarded that on to, I forwarded it on to Mr. Stalker.
I already know what the statute says. I'm just
Okay.
wondering how you came to the conclusion that our DDA in fact is separate?
That it is separate. A DDA, by its very nature, is separate. I'm not an attorney. I talked to Mr. Stalker about this, and I believe Mr. Nordine as well. Your DDA was set up several years ago, and as far as I'm aware, everything was done properly, but I am not an attorney, so if there is some legal issue with how it was set up, that's something that you'll have to talk with your legal counsel about. But DDAs in general are all shown in the state of Michigan, per the state of Michigan's rules, to be shown this way as a legally separate entity. So I guess I would have to refer you to your legal counsel on whether it was set up properly. If it is set up properly, then it is a legally separate entity per the state of Michigan accounting procedures manual that I can provide.
Anybody have anything else?
I do. I don't have questions that came without, but I guess it just occurred to me to say some things. As for the adjustments, just so everyone, the board's aware, the adjustments have been made, 70-some, so I've got a list of those, Aaron, too, if you'd like to see them, but those have been made. The interfund loan situation, Jamie alludes to the fact that I had spoken to her about it, or people had spoken to her about it, that was done. Changes have been made. And in about the administrative access, just for what it's worth, the day I got locked out, I couldn't run a report out of any of the modules that I got locked, and I was going, what in the world? I'm calling BSNA and stuff. Turned out that it was just a recommendation by the auditors, and it took a lot of work to get me back in to read only, to just do the reports, a lot of tweaking. Yeah. So for what it's worth, from my perspective, things happened. You know, I haven't been into UB in a while to see if I can't run reports out of there, what access, but I know cash receipting, accounts payable, I got locked out of. So just like I said, for what it's worth, for anyone who's curious to know that aspect of the situation.
My interest would be in administering systems. You give people only the information or only access to the level of permission that they need to do the job. In the specific responses to what you recommended and to what we've in the past responded to you, saying what we would do, the role of the clerk reviewing the billing before it's actually sent out, for example. Yeah, that would certainly, I don't know if that's an email report or what that might require, but you know, obviously going in there and the ability to make adjustments wouldn't be a good thing.
Correct.
And as far as, you know, Treasury, I think, yeah, it's making up a gap for the superintendent who didn't have great computer skills before, but I mean, I can appreciate us needing to do it. I see why. I'm just looking for what we could do going forward.
So you can run reports as read-only?
No, you can't. You have to customize and then you have to go into every aspect of the module to customize each thing. Billing, entry, you name it, every aspect of it has you have 10 different things, and then you have 30 different options under each one. And if you don't turn on one toggle switch, and that's the access that he needs, then he doesn't get the access that he needs. So I have to go through with BSNA and work for each person to try to do that. And I've got the majority of them. Thought I had everybody's done. I didn't realize that the deputy clerk and clerk still have admin access to UB. I think that's kind of odd, actually. But I will check that.
So from my experience today, I got turned on the thing, tried to print a receipt out of cash receipting. I was locked out cold.
Yeah, completely.
So then I called Jamie. I need to be able to print this receipt.
Right.
So she did some work, said you should be good to go. Tried to run the receipt. Called her back, so I can't get in.
Still can't get
Made
in.
more tweaks. It was like a 4-cycle deal.
That's a done Jamie.
All I know is it took some work, some tweaking to get me back in. So
Okay, so you have more than read-only for that?
I have what I need out of cash receipting and accounts payable.
I can run that report too.
Yeah, it's fine. It's the.
I have it. I'm not sure how you got it, those questions.
Yeah, I had it run by BSNA.
Oh. I didn't know you had access.
I
To be
called them up.
honest. And they gave it to you? Interesting.
He did call me earlier today to be able to run a list, and I gave authorization for the list.
You could have asked me.
Oh, I
I'd
just
love to run
ran
it for you.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
I just had one follow-up question on Mr. Weed's comment about the DDA.
Yes.
And I know you have to make certain assumptions in doing your audit based on information that you provided, either through the board or the administration or the statute that you referred to.
Correct.
The actual DDA statute did state it as requiring to be a body corporate. That was amended some years later where that it can be an extension of the township board. So my question is, if it is an extension of the township board, how would that affect your audit process with the DDA?
Well, regardless of whether it's incorporated or not, we still audit the DDA. So our procedures, we will still audit the DDA, and whether or not we consider it a separate legal entity, it really won't affect our procedures because we'll still audit it either way.
So there really wouldn't be any effect from
Not
your
on our
standpoint?
audit,
Okay.
no.
All right.
No.
Very good.
Yeah. And I wanted to also point out that, you know, we as your auditors are not just here to point out what's going wrong. We'd be happy to sit down with you and your management and assist you in any way we can, further explain any issues that you have. Like I said, make our recommendations. You know, we really want to see these things fixed as well, and we want to work with you to get them fixed. So anything that we can do to assist you and recommendations we can make, we'd be glad to do that. So.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much for the information.
Thank you.
All right, now we move into the next portion, which is public comments. There's a 4-minute time limit. For this first public comment period, a card needs to be filled out and turned in to the superintendent. When you come up and speak, please introduce yourself. Do we have any cards?
We do. The first one I have is Mark Miller with the management comment.
I wish I had spoken before the audit presentation. My name's Mark Miller. I live on base. In 2004, I was involved with the Sarbanes-Oxley implementation for the Boeing company, commuted from Seattle to Southern California. And I started my career with Price Waterhouse in 1978 in Columbus, Ohio. This afternoon, I went back and I summarized the management letter comments going back roughly 8+ years. And what strikes me is, for the type of organization that we have, we should only be getting 1 or 2 comments. The one comment being the financial statement prep controls. Each year, you as the board take a look and decide, is it worthwhile? And the other comment should be something obtuse or some new accounting or GASB pronouncement that came out and you have a disagreement with the auditors on the implementation. Segregation of duties, internal controls, that's basic auditing. Prior to moving back to Oscoda in 2013, I took a CPA course in the state of Washington. It was put on by the State Society and the government accounting audits, and it was 2-day. And I suggest that the township consider sending your W-2 employees there. 1, to learn so you don't have any surprises, and 2, more importantly, to make contacts. So when you come up and you see something that you haven't seen before, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, this is Susie. We met at the conference last year. Have you seen anything like this, and how did you handle it? I mean, really, you shouldn't have any comments, or it should be minors. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
The next one I have is Katney Camillan about transparency regarding the future reservation lot rent at Old Orchard Park.
You said the name is
Kathy, I'm sorry, Kathy.
Kathy?
Camillan?
That's her right here coming.
No. I'm Penny Damon.
No, Penny, not you, I don't think. Are you Kathy?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kathy Camilleri. I'm a resident of South Lyon, and we camp up at Old Orchard. My concern is the change in regulation from last year to this year, as far as how long we could rent a lot and how many, time we have to spend off the lot. And I understand that you don't want to create like a trailer park situation, and I understand that there's government regulations we have to follow. So I get that the policy itself needed to be changed. The concerns I have are how that was expressed to us. Like I know that my husband and I were on the email list for years. We had been 90-day, we had got our 90 days and then were able to reserve for the following year. And then last year I had to go home and give birth. I wasn't gonna do that up here. So we were never emailed, we were never contacted. And then we showed up this summer expecting to be able to stay like we had in the past from May to September. And we were told we had to move every 30 days, which is a hassle. I mean, it is. And it's also, it's tough for everybody out there because there's a lot of us that are there for long periods of time, and we have 8 different families that come up and meet all summer long. So just the transparency of explaining why we have to move, that this is a policy, and getting it expressed in writing so that we understand what's going on, and there's not that, just all the gossip and the trying to figure out who's, what's gonna happen next month or what's gonna happen next summer, and so that we can plan ahead. I mean, and I did hear enough of the budget to understand that Old Orchard is a big revenue maker here, so I think that keeping the residents over there happy is important. And like I said, I appreciate the fact that we want the weekend campers to come in. My kids have a blast with the people who come in on the weekends and have a blast with the people who are here for a week. So I just, I guess expressing a little more transparency as to the policies that you're going to maintain over there would be huge for campers, for us, and for the people who are coming in and out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next.
Next, I have Penny relating to questions and comments on the police department.
Hi, I'm Penny Dingman. I live here in Oscoda. I've been a long-time resident. I just heard last week, much to me being very happy, is that we've got a 2-point mill coming up for police department. Is that correct?
1.5.
1.5. I understand there was 2 mills. Is there 2 mills or is it 1.5?
1.5.
1.5 now, Penny.
Okay. Okay. And that's for 2 police officers, am I correct?
That's for a detective and a CSO position,
What is a CSO?
community service officer. That would help out with the schools and communication with the community.
CSO officer. Is that part of the police department? Is that
Yes.
part of what David needs?
Yes.
Somebody to be in the schools like he used to do.
Okay. Next question. While I was there, I looked in the lobby and you've got a picture of a park. A little tiny picture in the lobby. What's that?
I think we have
That's
3.
the architecture work we had done for the parks,
What park?
the township parks.
We have 5 township parks.
Okay, well, which one was done?
None of
Because
them,
this was just one.
none of them have been done, they've just been designed.
There's 3 maps in the lobby. Ratliff Park.
I've
Oscoda
seen
Beach Park.
one.
Okay, well there are 3. Oscoda Beach Park, Ratliff Park, and Fertile Field.
Okay, does Oscoda, the one park that I'm concerned about is the Oscoda Beach Park, and then we purchased more property, is that correct?
Yes, last
Okay.
year.
How much did that property cost us?
What was our amount on that? It was,
Sorry, I don't remember.
150,000, I think?
150,000. Did we pay that off?
I don't know if that's been cut or not yet, because we just recently finalized the grant for it.
Jamie? It's a grant?
Part of it was a grant.
Okay. Is it paid off?
We did pay them, yes.
They're completely paid off. We don't owe them any money.
Right.
So any more money that we put in there with renovations of a park,
We're actually not renovating that parcel, we're leaving it natural,
okay.
that parcel that we just purchased.
All right. Good to go. Do we have a, I just don't want any more money spent until we pay off what the hell we owe. Because we have a tendency to just bust on ahead. Next question. The last thing I have is, do we have a police department? I mean, someone that can, we do.
We do. We have a police
Who
department.
is it?
Well, we have a police chief. We have a. Is that what you're asking?
No, I thought there was a group of people that got together every month to discuss the police department.
Oh, I see.
Are we still doing that? We're not doing that
Don't do
anymore.
that.
So what, any questions for the police department, I should go to Mark?
Correct.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, that's what I got.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Penny.
Yeah. Awesome.
Next?
I have
Okay.
one request for the second comment.
Okay. All right, the floor is now closed to public comments. We now move to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything regarding the work session minutes for June 8th, regular meeting minutes of June 11th, and the closed session of June 11th? Are there any comments regarding the payment of bills for what is on here, $63,253.34, which a portion of that will be voted on later for the MIC-TV contract? Any comments regarding under reports for superintendent, failure of lift station number 4?
I do have more information on failure in addition to what I sent out. I got some clarification on the component that failed was the low-level control float, which de-energizes the pump electrical circuit to prevent the pumps from accidentally running dry. So that failed, and that's what tripped, and that's what had the emergency service come out. It wasn't responding properly. And as of Monday, that last Monday, the station is in automatic operation, and F&V installed a replacement float and wired it in. So the station is fixed, and so the regional supervisor said she will be following up with staff to make sure we purchase another float for our repair parts inventory. So if something to that effect in any of the other stations went out, they would have one on hand, and it wouldn't have to be ordered to be placed in there. And there are no other repair issues with that lift station number 4 at this time.
Thank you. Any comments regarding the revenue sharing estimate for 2018-2019? And any comments regarding the F41 street lighting?
The map that was provided is from Consumers Energy, is that correct?
It is from Consumers Energy, and it shows the 8. I don't know why it doesn't, but it does. It will alternate sides. They have them all on the same side.
Exactly.
It will alternate sides, and based on our last discussion from a work session, I have them trying to develop a quote to extend that street lighting plan out to the Warrior Pavilion, out to the entrance of the Ratliff Park out there.
Well, that is fine out to Ratliff, but my concern, and I've expressed it before, and I can't make head or tail out of this little bitty map. Are the new lights going to go up to and including the junction where you drive onto the former base, or not?
I think there's already light on that junction.
There
But
is.
the map goes all the way up to Van Etten Dam Road.
Oh,
Which is that, roughly that junction.
all right,
That's where that light is.
good.
Yeah, that light lights that intersection, which is otherwise a little precarious because it comes
Very.
in. Yeah.
And we could have had an answer today regarding the whole project, except when going back in the communications, we found that after our November work session, it was never communicated to consumers for the lighting going up to Ratliff Park.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments on the consent agenda? All right, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, subcommittee reports and project updates. First, I have the Oscoda Community Center survey results and final report.
Yes, that would be me. So, this topic has been coming up to the board and to the public for about a year now. So I'm here to present the final results of the survey that we actually ran last summer. We've been using the results for the last year. I presented a preliminary summary of these results some months ago to the board. I think it was last November. And so now, we essentially, having used this document and discussed it amongst the subcommittee, we're presenting it now in its final form. Certainly, I don't expect this will appear in some quotation marks or something in the newspaper. This would be a newspaper in itself, but nothing here is substantially changed from the summary that was published earlier. But there are a number of details, clearly. It's 130 pages long. There are a number of charts and graphs in this particular document. It is chock full of information. Everything from demographics to what individual demographics of the respondents to the survey are looking for, what they want. So this has been a tremendous asset, in my opinion, for the township, since I've never seen anything quite this detailed produced by the township before. And it also represents the third survey for the Oscoda Community Center. So we have a period now of prior surveys where this now represents a present look, a very in-depth look of what we're looking for, and what we can then decide what we want to do with the community center, the activities and ways we can enhance that experience. This was to support the purpose of the subcommittee that was put into place by this board roughly 16 months ago. We were looking for the subcommittee to determine ways in which the subcommittee could come up with other ways we could make money, frankly. To the point of earlier discussion with Ms. Carruthers from the audit, we have been subsidizing the community center substantially for years. So this was an attempt to get information in our hands and make judgments and decisions that we thought would be most beneficial and productive and make money. So with that, I offer that, and we're going to be putting the PDF on the website, so it'll be publicly available. And at this point, I'd like to then, if you don't mind, Mr. Reed, if you don't mind me stealing your thunder, if we can go to the next item, which is...
I got a question about
I'm so sorry.
the survey.
Sure, yeah.
So you said that it's a combination of the 3 surveys that you did?
No, it's the third.
It's the
It
third.
represents a third, meaning it's the third of the others, yeah.
Okay,
The
so
third.
out of 7,000 residents in Oscoda, you've got a combination number of Oscoda, Sable, 140 people took the survey? Do you know what the breakout is?
50 people, I think was the number.
150?
Uh-huh.
And how many were Oscoda residents out of that?
That is on page 8, and the answer is 140 of the 150. So there's your 88% of the respondents.
Okay, so then 10%, the 10 other people were AuSable residents?
Yeah, the 12, they go into Birch Run, Commerce, Davison, Dearborn, East Tawas, Flint, Grand Rapids, Greenbush, Harlingen, Texas. 3 from Mankato, Romeo, Silverwood, and Whittemore. So we have apparently people who not only just work here, I imagine, but people who might actually been here visiting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
All right, subcommittee update. Community Center Subcommittee update.
Yeah, and for this, I was going to ask that Mary Aldhaver would present the information that's in our board packet and give the final report for the Oscoda subcommittee, the Oscoda Community Center subcommittee.
She's the chair.
So, yeah, and she is the chairperson for the subcommittee, so she'll represent. And we do have Alipsidis, the Director of Parks and Rec, who also runs the community center, in the audience in case there are questions.
It's been a pleasure to work with this committee. Great group of people, a lot of energy, hard work, good ideas, and dedication. And all of us want to make the community center the best it can be. We have a lot of ideas that we've picked from the survey, as well as other input that we've picked up from our members and just people we've talked to. And we devised a mission statement and a vision statement this year, which updated us a bit, and that's in your packet. We've got some figures about attendance and membership numbers and income in the last couple of years. So we have a rise in memberships and revenue. Not a huge one, but it's a trend that we're pleased with. And we had several interesting things that we did this year that are new. Last May, we had a health and wellness family celebration at the community center, and we had a great committee that did everything. They decorated, they set up, babysitting and arts and crafts for kids, and basketball and every kind of activity that we offer there, so that people could get a chance to have hands-on experience with it. We had free spin classes and yoga classes, and we just gave a good taste that people could come in free that day, and not only that, but we fed them. We had donations from local businesses that gave a nice meal. We had prizes. We had radio station. It was quite an event, and I was really excited to see people that I had never seen there before, and they're bringing their families, and so we're hoping that we're building our community center membership by putting on things that we haven't done before. And who doesn't like a free lunch and free entertainment for your kids and all that sort of thing? So that was a big success, I think. We've also done quite a bit of work at trying to publicize what we have to offer. The survey was really helpful that Tim did, and Linda Slaggert helped him with devising some questions, and then Tim, of course, did his thorough job of reporting, which we appreciate because we can use some of the ideas that we discovered there. And among those, we found that people didn't know that they could save money using a punch card for a walk-in visit. And so we instituted that, which made people save a little money on their multiple visits. I think that was a success. We extended the season by cutting hours here and adding them there where we thought they were most used. So we thought that we were serving the people quite well there. We had a great concert this spring. The survey showed that people wanted concerts, so we gave them a jazz concert that was a big success. It was profitable, it was fun, and again, we had some real dedicated hard workers who just did anything they could to make that a success. So that was our first profitable venture. The wellness thing was all donations from the committee mostly to fund everything except the food, which was donated. So we put on one that was, kind of out of our pockets, not the community center's budget, but our own pockets, just to try to get people in because we're that dedicated to the whole idea. I really appreciate being able to work with such a good quality of committee people. We really had so much available to us with all that brain power and brainstorming and everything. It was fun. So I'm really appreciative of all those who put their time and effort and energy into it and the enthusiasm. We're hoping to make this the best place we can be, community center, and we just think there's no place to go but up here with rising trend of memberships and revenues and new ideas and a survey to fall back on. So we're looking forward to another good year and hoping that everybody comes out, supports us, tells everybody about it because it's word of mouth. It's a fun place. We're trying to make the focus more on a community center. You know, everyone thinks of it as a gym, a workout place, an activity center. But it could also host a lot of community events that would not necessarily require athletic ability or sweat. So that's one of the things that we want to work on in the future. And I know our committee's to be dissolved, which is fine, but I appreciate being able to serve on it, and I thank all the people who helped so much with it. Any questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Mary.
All right. Then next we have the granulated activated carbon easement agreement, which was finalized by the airport authority. That was a few days after our last board meeting. The granulated activated carbon storm sewer access agreement, which is in the packet or was distributed to the board members here at the meeting. Property sales, the Height property sale, which is a Wordsmith property, paperwork completed, so that'll be closed up here in a few days. The property sale of the old EDC office property, there's a closing tomorrow for that, and 205 East Dwight Street property sale will be closing, should be this Friday, as long as the schedule holds for that. For the Phase 1 water main extension, there was confusion as to the amount of money, whether it was $300,000 or $325,000 that the state has pending in their budget for us, and it is $325,000. And we are also tying up the bid closing documents for that project so that we can get construction started. There is also the Health Department, State Health Department is holding a contamination community meeting on June 27th, which is this Wednesday. There's a session from 2 to 4, which is just an open house. People can come in, ask individual questions. And then from 6 to 8, there is the actual information briefings. And both of those are being held at the Catholic Church on US 23. Does anybody have anything else to add to all of that?
Yeah. As chairman of the Road Paving and Sidewalk Committee, there's some good news. The Road Commission, Oscoda County Road Commission, was able to find a small window of opportunity to get crushed road gravel way earlier than they ever expected. So Colbath Road has already been ground up, new gravel put on, the old seal coat has been crushed up and made part of the whole mix. And the actual paving, instead of September or something like that, may be in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Nice.
Much earlier than ever talked. No guarantees, but they're way ahead of schedule on that. Even with the 2 giant projects that are going on in this area, the repavement of the runway here at the airport and the road construction between here and Tawas takes up a lot of trucks, a lot of asphalt, and we're still going to get it done early. So, good news.
That's great.
All right, thank you. Anybody have anything else?
Yeah, one comment from the Planning Commission. We had requested of the township to look at the Municode to use for the zoning administrator to use. That is a company that upgrades our zoning ordinance and municipal code. They already have been hired by the township at some point in the past to deal with our code book, but not the ordinance book. And we are making a lot of changes in the ordinance. And that is a tedious process to do and have it done right. And this company specializes in that, and I would hope, I know we're not going to, I just wanted to bring it up so the board could be aware of it. Hopefully we can get that on the agenda in an upcoming meeting, but I think it's something that's desperately needed to make sure that our zoning and code book are up to date, and so that we don't have any legal issues that would come from that failure. So just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned, I think I heard you at the beginning said that the Planning Commission has requested of the township to pursue the Municode. Has that happened formally, or are you saying it's going to happen at a future meeting?
It has happened. I was expecting to see this on the agenda several meetings ago, but it wasn't. I think maybe because we had so many other things that we were dealing with, but it is something that we need to take a look at.
Okay, so when you say it's been requested of the township administration, not the board formally?
Right.
Okay.
Right. It hasn't been on the packet yet.
When was the last time that it was updated?
On the code?
Yeah.
They said the last time it was updated was 2015.
And it's changed that much since then?
Not the code. There has been some things added that we need to add to the code since 2015, but there are a lot of changes to the zoning ordinance.
And then when you say the ordinance book or ordinance, you're talking just ordinance 165, not all the township's ordinances, just the zoning ordinance.
That is the only ordinance we have is 165.
That's the only zoning ordinance or planning commission ordinance, but the township has many other ordinances.
Well, that's the code book, and just for clarification, there are two books of laws for the township that the township runs its activity under. One is the zoning ordinance 165, which deals with everything to do with land use. The code book is used more by the police department. That would be civil things that would the police department would have accounting over it, and that needs to be updated, and as well as the like I said, Municode said that since 2015 was the last time they did an update on the code book, and I don't know why, when apparently at some point the board had approved signing up with Municode for the code book, but not the ordinance book. I wasn't involved back in that time, so I don't know what the reasoning was, but it would have been better to sign up for both at the time. But going forward, I think it would be well worth our while to get this Municode put in place so they can handle our updates of the zoning ordinance and the code book.
When was the last time the ordinance then, the code, not the code book, but the other book that you were referring to was updated?
Well, we're making updates to the zoning ordinance,
Right.
an ongoing process, but they need to be put in there in a proper order, and that's such a time-consuming.
Okay.
And that's what Municode would do.
All right, that makes
and
sense.
they have a staff of 25 lawyers that's what they do, and they make sure it's right. Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, then on to reports. First is dissolution of the Oscoda Community Center Subcommittee.
I want to thank Al and Mary for being here tonight. The Oscoda Community Center Subcommittee has presented the survey results, final report, and provided a presentation summarizing the subcommittee efforts. And based on the information and the presentation provided, the Oscoda Community Center Subcommittee no longer requires the official status as subcommittee.
Any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to indicate that I personally would welcome seeing a Friends of the Oscoda Community Center organization start up as a substitute for the subcommittee. I think that we've found a number of people in the community who are interested in the community center, and I think it would be a wonderful opportunity for folks to chime in and join into a more grassroots organization that doesn't require the overhead of an actual formal government subcommittee.
So this subcommittee was originally formed 15 or 16 months ago.
I'm going to say 16 months ago. I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head.
And I believe its original purpose was to resolve the $75,000 a year deficit that results from the community center.
Not necessarily resolve, but try to give some advice and give some direction as to where the money funding could come from. To some degree, we have established that answer in the report that we heard this evening from Ms. Altaver. But the actual answer is we haven't resolved the entire gap of subsidy that we just heard from our auditor tonight. I mean, we haven't resolved that. But people are still interested in the community center regardless. So the possibility of us maybe in the future doing a millage specifically for it, I mean, that's still a possibility. When we kind of walked into this committee with that in mind, but we shelved that in lieu of the road commission and the police millages, letting them go first. I think it was. I think there was an opinion amongst the millage committee, and I think amongst the board, that trying to do 3 at once was probably not going to work so well. So I think we've delivered a product.
How much of a gap had been filled then?
By this committee in the last 16 months? I don't know that I have that number. I think it's a matter of maybe hundreds to $1,000 or something like that, maybe. I don't know. Something like that. A lot of what was done was promotion. You know, we did a lot of community outreach by getting folks into the community center to either have some kind of like a fair, for example, a family day, you know, walk in and bring your kids and see what's available. And then the dance was our first real money-making venture, which, as Ms. Altaver had mentioned, came as an outshoot from the survey itself. You know, people asked for that, so we tried it. 100 people, it was pretty good. And there's different other bands that could be brought into that particular gym. It seemed like a viable venue, frankly. I mean, it's not your custom concert hall, you know, that you get in large cities, but it certainly is. It certainly was viable for that kind of band and music.
It was mentioned that the trend is that there's increasing memberships and increasing revenue. Do we have the data for that?
There is something in the board pack. I don't know if there's trend. If it's an uptick, is probably maybe the better term for it. But let me see. I was going to say it's in the report. There's a.
I have some numbers here on the attendance.
Yeah, thank you.
15-16, the attendance was 3,696. Last year was 12,890. This year it was 14,208. So that's a fair increase in the attendance, and the revenue was up. The prior 2 years, the revenue was virtually identical. This last year, it was up by a little over about $2,300.
From my perspective, from paying attention and from being present at some meetings, taking minutes, there was a lot of, from my perspective, there's a lot of value added. There was value added to the community center at a neutral cost. So it didn't cost the township more money, like restructuring the hours. You know, obviously there's been, I think, feedback on cutting hours, but tolerable, I think, is what I've heard through sitting through meetings. There were things that were done that were cost neutral that provide value. So it won't always show up on the balance sheet, but to me there was value added in a lot of things at no cost or little cost. So just a flip side to look at it.
Yeah, a number of the events, as Ms. Altaver had mentioned, were supported by the community with donations, whether food or beverages or whatnot. So there was, and the events were nice. They were very nice, and they were well attended. So, yeah, like I said, there seems to be very clearly a a population of people that I don't think is purely just the people who go to the community center, who have an interest in the community center. So I think in the future, I mean, this is my personal opinion, I'm not here representing the subcommittee, but it's my opinion and what I've observed that I think there should be consideration given down the road to looking into whether a millage is actually something we want to put in front of the citizens of Oscoda to see if they believe that it's something they want to support.
I'd hate to see, I agree with that, and if the millage is really reasonable, that means low, to generate some money, but I'm not a believer that the community center has to pay for itself. There are certain amenities that taxpayers should expect. We don't make the fireworks pay for themselves.
Correct.
And so forth. But just having a community center, and as Mary said, not just a gymnasium, not just sweat, but other social functions and stuff, is just something that towns should provide and usually do. But if we can cut the loss, the red tape, that's great. But as far as bringing it right up to even, I don't think we have to do that. So
I agree with that, but $75,000 is that's a strong deficit.
Yep.
For a small community like ours.
Yep.
All right. Anything else? Is there a motion?
All right, I'll move to dissolve the Oscoda Community Center Subcommittee. Period.
I'll support that with thanks to the committee for all their work and efforts.
Sincerely, thank you.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Thank you for all the hard work that the committee had put on that project. Next, USDA Farm Market Grant Documentation Requirements, otherwise known as the Huron Shores Artisan Hall.
So based on the discussion at the previous board meeting on the 11th of June, the USDA grant representative provided the township with corrected and unsigned SF 425s, and based on our work session last Friday, I followed up with the USDA grant representative. And on the board packet, page 146 of the PDF, for the SF 425 for the periods of 7/1/2014 through 6/30/2017, there should be a correction to line F, which is the federal share of unliquidated obligations. That should be increased by 3 cents to reflect $52,631.94. So I would move that based on that correction be considered with for the board.
Any comments?
I would just state that at the last meeting, I pointed out that all of the documentation was wrong. The numbers didn't add up the way the forms were supposed to, but I think there are more forms here now than there were originally. And of the 7 forms that we had in our packet, just the one was off by a few cents. So if they made that correction, we should be good.
And when the supervisor would sign those, we would reflect that.
Okay.
Is that a motion, Bill?
Yeah, I'll move to have the supervisor sign the corrected SF 425 forms.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, application for police cruiser grant fund through the USDA.
All right, so this is the first portion of carrying out the police budget. So what we're trying to accomplish here is to be able to apply for the USDA grant funding, and the process is identical to the purchase of the police cruiser last year, where 55% of the cost of the police cruiser can be funded through the USDA grant. The 2018 budget planned for the purchase of a police cruiser, and if you can look at 101-207-981, that is where the funding was budgeted for the police cruiser. So the township is requesting to begin the application process for the grant, and I have since sent, I had a question from the last work session last Friday. I provided supplemental information for you tonight where it shows the last time we used a company called Cruisers, and there's an invoice for $5,520, and that is the invoice for the last retrofitting performed for the police cruiser. And those vary, and it really depends on the equipment that comes off of the old cruiser and whether that can be applied to the new cruiser. It expires after so many years, and I don't know what equipment would be coming off of a cruiser to be putting on. But we have a rough ballpark of $5,500.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we do authorize the township to apply for the partial grant-funded police cruiser.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Gayeski.
And for the supervisor to sign the documents?
Yes, clerk and supervisor sign the proper documents.
Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes.
Who
Motion.
supported that?
That was support by Mr. Gayeski.
Very good.
Motion's passed. Next, DDA lighthouse placement.
All right, so the board had previously granted the DDA's request and approved the placement of the lighthouse in front of the Huron Shores Artisan Hall during the March 26th board meeting of this year. However, the previous board action was conditioned on a lease agreement that you'll find in your packet. So while working through the legal process, the township has since determined that a lease agreement for the lighthouse is not necessary.
Any comments?
So for my own clarity, this recommendation to not have a lease came from who?
The attorney.
The attorney, okay.
We could have a lease, but it's not required to have a lease.
I thought we already voted on this.
We did, but the condition was on a lease. So it's being brought back so that it can be placed without a lease.
Yep.
So the recommendation is to not have a lease.
And place it.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
And the point of the placement is the same as was approved before, not talking about a different location.
Correct, we're talking in the garden area of the parking lot that's between the Artisan Hall and the IGA building.
Right.
The old IGA building.
Right.
And the so-called lighthouse is not really a lighthouse.
Correct, it is considered an ATON, aid to navigation.
Yes, it's a former navigation light that was out on one of the jetties at the river mouth, but it looks like a lighthouse, and it's certainly marine-like, so.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the DDA requested placement without the creation of a lease agreement.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gayeski,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion is passed. Next, DDA Huron Shores Artisan Hall pricing schedule.
At the DDA meeting on the 12th of June, the Huron Shores Artisan Hall pricing schedule was approved by the DDA, and that is attached for your review. The DDA is requesting Township Board approval for the Huron Shores Artisan Hall pricing schedule.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the fee schedule for the Huron Shores Artisan Hall.
It's a mouthful.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, snowmobile trailhead agreement.
So the proposed renewal of the snowmobile trailhead agreement is up for the first of 4 potential annual renewals. And in the board packet, you will see previous communication from the Iosco County Parks and Recreation Committee and the previous superintendent's report from July 24th of 17, as well as a copy of the operating agreement for your review. So the initial contract was last year. This is the first renewal, and theoretically, we could renew another 3 times under this agreement.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move as presented.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion is passed. Next, sale of the old dive van.
So the new dive van was delivered to the fire department last Monday, the 18th, and the old dive van is no longer needed by the fire department. Various township departments have enjoyed previous success competitively selling older vehicles through bid corp auctions, surplus auctions, and the township will be working with Oscoda Township to determine the reimbursement of the proceeds from the sale of the old dive van.
Comments?
Just information, the old dive van, we're saying, it sounds like a piece of furniture, doesn't it? Dive van, is that? So, is a used Snap-on tool truck, so we're the second owners of it. And the new one kind of looks like it, except it's bigger. And I guess the second thing is, I'm guessing that the purchase of this vehicle, and the fire department guys are delighted with it, beautiful, is possible because of the millage that the citizens of Oscoda Township have provided for fire department equipment. And here's a prime example of what we can do with extra millage. So.
If you've not been through the new dive van, I recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very well set up, makes for a much more efficient operation of divers being able to suit up and unsuit and conduct their operations, especially during the winter time when it is difficult to be mobile in the freezing cold and after you've been in freezing water. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we authorize the competitive sale of the old dive van.
If I can ask, part of what your narrative, Dave, was got to get together with Oscoda to how to divvy up the money that we generate from this sale. Is that a problem, or why don't you just use the same formula for what Oscoda pays for police and fire?
I already have 2 emails to Miss Jamie Carruthers on how to correctly book the proceeds and be able to reimburse Oscoda Township. So I'm obtaining clarification on how to do that appropriately.
Okay. All right, good.
Yep.
Your support?
Need support.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion is passed. Next, MIC TV contract.
Right, so discussions regarding an updated contract agreement with our broadcast vendor have been underway for some time. And the most recently updated version of this contract was then modified after our work session with last Friday. And so you will see the updated version has a table removed as well as a supplemental information provided. The RAB quote is moved from informational back to the last page of this contract.
Comments?
The total amount that we get for the cable fee is about $70,000. So we're going to be spending over 2/3 of it on just this process. So what are we getting in addition to the service already that we have for that much money?
I think the answer in prior meetings that we've discussed this topic is that the money that was spent in the past was not sustainable at $200 a meeting. There simply wasn't any way to provide the staff, the equipment, and maintain the equipment with that budget. That was the statement made by them, and what I think was reasonably accepted by Jim and I, who were on the discussion committee, or I'm not sure what the word was, advisory board or whatever you want to call it, that reviewed this contract with Mr. Stalker when he was here.
Right. I know I sat in a couple of those meetings
Yep.
when Jim was unable to do that, and I thought there was a few of the paragraphs that were going to be taken out, because I think I said a couple different times that I understood that the $200 is clearly not enough, and I appreciate the time and efforts that they have put into the broadcasting of the televised meetings. It was definitely my platform in 2004, to be honest.
Nice.
But I think that it's a little steep, and I know that we had other plans for some of that money to try to get internet services out to Old Orchard Park.
Right.
So that's going to take a big chunk of that, and we're not going to be able to move some of those things, other projects forward that we had designed to help other residents in the township too. So that's just my concern.
Understood.
Any other comments?
I'm struggling to find the RAB estimate in the contract that I have. Maybe that I have an older version, I'm not sure. Could someone?
You will see that in the board packet.
Okay.
At the very end, under informational, that sheet
Okay.
has since been moved up. So if you...
Oh, I see. It's okay. Very good. Question answered. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Anything else?
So then the RAB meetings will be covered too by the township. Will be paying that expense?
We have not approved that yet.
Okay.
Yeah, the intention of this contract was to pre-negotiate the rates so that we would know what we would have to spend easily, quickly, without having to go and get a quote. So for the period of a year or whatever, these would be valid prices. That was the idea. And it also not just included kind of package deals like a board meeting, but it also included an a la carte menu of what it would be if we wanted to just add another whatever, like a camera or whatever it might actually be. So we could have that discussion.
And we can also remove items if need be?
Of course, I think that's true. Yep.
And also it gives us a number to go after if we're seeking grants to pay for
That's correct.
televising RAB meetings.
As in the case of the RAB meeting, correct, yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
How many RAB meetings did we agree to pay for initially?
It's my understanding we've already paid for the two, or excuse me, it was two, and we just did the second one.
Yeah.
So, meaning the one in August is currently not paid for, and I don't think we have a bidder at this time.
Well, my yes vote on televising RAB meetings, well, I voted no because I thought we could have done it a little cheaper, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
But the basic idea was okay, but I think the whole idea in my mind was that let's get this started. Let's let people know if they're, can use YouTube and so forth, and see what RAB meetings are doing. But I didn't know this was a slippery slope where we would go on indefinitely.
I don't think it is.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I don't think that is. There's no foregone conclusion in any of the meetings I've attended that that's the case. So are there any other questions that I can help with?
Are you satisfied with this agreement?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the future, we'll arrive to these agreements of when we're going to have subcommittees or work sessions or whatever those entities will be called and whatever their purpose is, that will arrive at the agreement in a way that takes wholly into consideration the efforts of the people that put their time into to develop it. So, well, then I'll move to accept the MIC TV contract as well as the addendum that describes the cost of the RAB meetings, as stated here in the board packet.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
No.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
No.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Can I add something?
Sure.
I am interested in pursuing a date for broadcasting on the TV. If we could follow up with that and get, I don't know if Mr. Weed, Mr. Hawk would like to speak.
Actually, I'm having
Please,
trouble
speak it up,
hearing you. I
Dennis.
can't hear what you're saying.
No? Okay.
Mr. I don't.
Pursuing a date or of broadcasting the meetings via television.
Glad you asked that. Just Friday, we have Picture back on the television.
So right now,
Tonight, we're not on the air.
Okay, all right.
Reason being is Charter is still working with some adjustments. But we have Picture.
okay.
And we don't have sound. It's Picture. So we're going back to the first days of the the silent films, and we're working our way back forward to talkies. I've been in very close contact with our charter engineer, and he's very excited to get us on probably within the next 2 weeks. We have programming already lined up. We had some equipment arrive today, some minor connectors that we needed, but he had said, I've got to get in there and see this and see that, and I said, you're above my head when you're talking about those levels, but he has already told me that he's working on it, and if you tune on 190 right now, you will see our logo.
Okay.
So we are that much closer.
Okay. So hopefully 2 weeks.
That's my goal, and
So hopefully 2 weeks, meaning next board meeting?
that's, again,
would
our
be
goal, yes. By
full-blown,
next
okay.
board meeting, we can turn it on, and I already have some promo announcements designed. I have, like I said, new programs. We're going to start off with what we're calling a soft grand opening. Again, just get back on the air, and then actually launch a grand reopening. We're back bigger, better than ever. We actually have, we're on 188, of course, and 190 here in the local area. And I asked Bob, the Charter, if we had changed those numbers, because I had seen them moving around the dial during one of Charter's recent channel shuffles. He said, nope, you're back where you were, you're good to go. He says, except in Au Gres. I said, what's wrong with Au Gres? He says, you're on 189 in Au Gres. So we have 3 channels now. We have 188, which is our PE channel, our public educational channel. 189 in the Au Gres area, which is the PEG channel, public educational and governmental, and then 190 here in the rest of the area, which is the public educational and governmental channels. So we gained another number in the arsenal.
What is the full region we broadcast in?
The full region, from what I have been led to from Charter to be told, since they will not give us a full coverage map, we reach approximately to Harrisville, all the way down to just north of Standish, and all the way across to just west of Hale. We have quite a large chunk. There's approximately 10,000 homes they told us we covered. So we are going to do our best to get the word out to those 10,000 residents that they have a place to go again for local programming.
Is there any way that you would be able to reach agreements with other municipalities for what programming they would like to partake in to help disperse some of these costs a little better?
That is something we've discussed at our board meetings. We would like to go to Tawas and say, would you want your board meetings on here? And we could use this much funding from that to offset our budget that we present to you. I need to find out from both Charter, or actually from Charter, from our attorney, your attorney actually, and other parties to make sure that is legitimately okay to do, since Oscoda Township is the licensee of the channel. I want to make sure that we can offer services to another municipality without getting ourselves in any trouble. But that is something we've talked about since day one. Currently, there's no other municipalities that are, and I'm going to use the word, brave enough to have their board meetings on television. They're all running scared right now. They go, oh, we don't want that. No, no, no. Well, you know what? Take a lesson from my friends here in Oscoda, because, and you, Mr. Weed, have said it. You've heard from people that they've watched the meetings and been very, grateful to see the inner workings of their government. So, and as for the YouTube, I didn't watch it while I was driving, but I had YouTube turned on in my car listening to the meeting. I just got back from West Branch. I literally was working all day today. And listening to the meeting in my vehicle on the way over here, being able to keep in track of what was going on. And thank you for keeping the young lady who did the audit here for so long, because I was able to get back from West Branch and be able to enjoy chatting with you. But we're getting anywhere between 14 and 25 viewers steadily now on YouTube. And we have had the joke that, if we ever have a fireworks meeting again like that, our ratings go up and it makes for good television. But yes, a hot button issue will, of course, bring out more viewers. We know this. So every now and then, if you could spice something up, we'd appreciate it, because it makes our ratings go up. But we have new programming lined up. I've been searching through our normal sites that we get our programming from. I'm able to come back with Michigan Out of Doors again, which is a huge program on CMU Public TV. I actually contacted the show's owner and said, can we rebroadcast your show? He said, yes. We air on Thursdays on CMU. After that, you can have it. So we're only one day behind of the actual release of the current issue of Michigan Out of Doors. Very popular program. We have cooking shows again. We're going to relaunch our Talkin' History series. One, because it was a very good program, and number two, we want to honor Mr. Glatfelty. And so we'll relaunch that in a rerun, spotlighting him as well. We've already been in talks about our various events coming up and parades and everything else again, and try to get back to the quality we had and better. We already have a pretty good signal going, but we've talked to Charter about ourselves purchasing an HDMI encoder, and we would be one of very few PEG stations that broadcast in HD. And of course, Bob at Charter is very excited because it makes his job a whole lot easier. Right now, we take our signal, HD, convert it to analog, send it to him, he reconverts it to digital, and then puts it back on Charter. So there's several steps along the way that are involved. Once we get a digital encoder, it goes right straight through down the fiber line, and it's as beautiful as can be. But if, even just looking at the television here in the room, that's the quality of picture we can expect. And that's what we're shooting for. And most of you have known, this has been my goal since day one when we started this, is I want somebody to say, Oscoda has a what? A TV station? Get out. And I think so far we've gotten mighty close to it. So I thank you very much. Yes, Ms. McGuire, it's about 2/3 of that budget. And we agonized over that. We didn't want to appear greedy.
Right.
We certainly did not. But and I always tell people, if you think that's bad, go drive down I-86 past the Detroit Public Broadcasting Building. That's that 4-story beautiful building that houses one public broadcasting area. And then we have a little 6x6 room. Not complaining, trust me. But again, we spent many hours in meetings saying, do we really need to charge? No, let's cut that down a little bit. Let's cut that down a little bit. Even to the point of drawing ire from Mr. Cummings saying, no, that's too cheap. Okay, sorry, we'll raise it another $1 or $2. You know, we don't want the citizens of Oscoda and Osable to think, oh, these guys are just taking a paycheck off the township.
Right.
That is not our intention, and those of you here in the audience and on TV, we thank you.
I have a suggestion and a question. The question first. If you get all the legalities straightened out and we get on the air, get 3 channels, 188, 89, and 90, what about people that are not charter customers? Can they still get the meetings through YouTube?
They can get them through YouTube, yes. We are not going to stop that.
Okay.
That is something that we started out of necessity because the stations were off the air.
Yeah.
And that is actually easier than broadcasting on television. That's just hooking up to the internet with a couple of pieces of software and making it happen. That will continue all throughout. We're also looking into the possibility of streaming our programming that's on the air already as well, which is a double whammy then. If you can't get our station, you can get our programming via streaming. Those are some legalities we have to work out with our program sponsors and owners for copyright, and there's different ways they will charge you and or ask you if you're broadcasting on television versus broadcasting on the internet. So we just have to make sure we have all those T's crossed and I's dotted, and there are several stations that do it. Several public stations that have a streaming site and analog televisions or digital television site. So we are in the process of checking that out as well.
My suggestion is if you, again, go through the legalities, get that ironed out, and you decide to go to other neighboring entities and suggest that they also be televised, I would do that at their meetings, not talk to some leader one-on-one privately. Go to their meetings and present your case. You know what I mean? Instead of on a Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock talking to the mayor or the supervisor or something.
Right, right.
So
we're looking to put together an actual presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that shows what we can do, not only for the municipalities, but for other things. Some of the stuff that we did last year before we went off the air was we ran the public service announcement about running your water in the wintertime. We ran that thing constantly so people could remember to turn their faucets on. We'd like to get a little bit deeper into being one of the first lines of information being disseminated in the fact of something going wrong. We'd like folks to turn to us and say, okay, what's happening downtown? I see the fire engines took off. What's going on? And they turn the TV station, there's a crawl going down. Hey, fire on River Road, avoid the area. If that's our goal, is to become just like, and I always say this, just like the big kids. When we can go out there and have instant breaking news or instant breaking announcements, then we've arrived.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Do we have a motion about payment of the MIC-TV invoices that were submitted prior to this meeting?
Do we?
So moved.
What do you have?
Nothing.
Okay. Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion is passed. Next, Hushra Board Township Representative selection.
In previous years, the superintendent and supervisor have held positions on the Huron Shores Regional Utility Authority, HUSHRA, as representatives of Oscoda Township Municipal Water System. In November 2016, the board acted for Robert Stalker to be the primary representative and Aaron Weed to be the alternate. With recent changes in the township, request is being made by the township supervisor to appoint Aaron Weed as the primary representative and Dave Schaefer as the alternate. Once Mr. Schaefer has thoroughly been trained on the HUSHRA system, the board can then review, at that time, if they desire to change, our HUSHRA appointed positions.
Any comments?
I think it was originally appointed that way because of the election process, right? Because the supervisor position changed a little more frequently than the superintendent.
Yeah. And the
Okay.
vote in November was just an extension of what already, November of 17, I believe, that's the date, 16, November of 16. That, the way you presented it is fine, but it appears to be like some new thing, and it was just kind of a, okay, we've got a new supervisor, so we need a new name. And Robert Stalker will continue to be the primary delegate, and the new supervisor will be the alternate, as I had been for 8 years prior to that. I fail to see the reason for this. I'm guessing that maybe there's some misinformation that whoever is the primary delegate from Oscoda automatically becomes the chairman of the HUSRA board because we are the largest water user. And that is not true. That is not in the bylaws of HUSRA at all. Bob Stalker was picked to be chairman because they liked the way he handled the meetings and so forth. Meetings are not that technical. I was his alternate for 8 years, and every once in a while he was on vacation or something like that, and they'd throw me in as the chairman, and I would have to chair a meeting as the alternate. And I didn't attend every meeting, you know, so I maybe hadn't been there for a month or so and wasn't fully cognizant of what the issues were, but you can do it. I'm not a genius by any means, and I did stumble through. Mr. Schaefer will not have to be the chairman. They're going to have a complete reorganization meeting next Tuesday, the 3rd. They always meet on the first Tuesdays of the month. One meeting a month, that's all. And they will completely, you know, pick a new treasurer. You'd be a good one for treasurer. You were finance man in Brooklyn. But they're going to pick all their officers brand new, and I guarantee you they are not going to lean on you to be the chairman. I mean, that's a little bit much to be expected. And I would have one more comment, is that if Dave is the primary, he will join 3 other people that are going to be rookies on that board. And I'm sure our man, Mr. Schaefer, is just as competent as the other 3. And there is a Mr. McCardle at Baldwin Township. He maybe has attended one meeting or so, but he's new. A new city manager for East Tawas, Mr. Brent Behringer. Tuesday will be his first meeting. Tawas City, Angie Horning is going to be working her way in. Right now, she's kind of alternating back and forth. And she is the city manager of Tawas City. So you're going to be in good company. You'll be one of 4 that are brand new people. You're not going to be by yourself. I do not see any reason for this change. You know, you can do this, and I hope the board has confidence in your abilities, I certainly do. We all voted for you unanimously. Do the job, one meeting a month, you know, and I know you're not asking for this, because I asked you earlier, how did this get on the agenda? Who suggested this? And it actually says, I believe the supervisor suggested this, so that's my view.
As I talked about at the work session Friday morning, which I believe you were not in attendance at.
That is true.
I said this is really up to the board, whatever they want to do. We're merely making a suggestion here. And considering that there are a lot of new people who are sitting on that board, and that I have quite a bit of water municipal experience, not to the level that those workers are at, but I still know a decent amount about how water infrastructure works. So that's why I recommended it like this. So I understand your point in this. However, I do want to make a point here that we are elected officials and we are elected to represent our township government. And part of that representation is over the municipal water system. And if we're just going to delegate things off onto somebody else for them to do the representation, I think that's kind of unfair to the people. So I'm in favor of later on, you know, if it gets a, I don't care what board member it is who represents on that HUSHRA meeting. But if later on we decide that, okay, the superintendent will represent it because it kind of helps out with turnover of board members, we still have our duty as elected officials to represent the people of our water, the water that they have to drink every day.
I can't see where you wouldn't still have that ability. You're in the township hall almost every day, and you could talk with, or go there as an alternate and see what's going on. And I know alternates can speak up. I did occasionally, and you can't sit at the table, but if you are that concerned, and I applaud you in your concern, but you can attend those meetings, and you don't have to be mute. You can talk then. I hear what you're saying, but I'm wondering, why do all these other entities that are part of the HUSRA thing send their city manager or some other delegate, you know, with the possible exception of Tawas City, who has Mr. Cook. But like I said, my information, my research is that he is not going to continue that indefinitely, that Mrs. Angie Horning is going to be the person. So I don't think
you're saying because the other municipalities are doing that, we should do that?
No, I'm just saying it's not. You kind of implied that we're pawning off, elected officials are pawning off the responsibility. And if that's really what you think, that's an insult to our new superintendent, that, you know, he can't quite do it. We're pawning it off on a guy that can't do as good a job as any of us.
Not at all what's being said.
Well, that's what it sounded like to me. And I don't see the reason for the change. So, especially since he's, you know, not going to be the only freshman in the school when he goes down there. So,
I guess my thought was that it really didn't matter one way or the other. I mean, I didn't see. I see that there's an ask for. It's being asked of us to decide. I don't, and I kind of feel like, well, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other which way it goes. It's like I don't. Okay. It doesn't matter. But I do get your point, Jim. And I guess my question out of this was, did you have a concern with all that you're trying to take on at this point with this new position and so many things going on? Are you looking for an opportunity for a little reprieve and make it a little easier to ramp up on something that's also new? Or did you have another thought that you haven't been given an opportunity to express?
So I'm learning, and I was able to attend on Tuesday the 5th, the last HUSHRA meeting. And so Bob and Aaron and I were all there, and I plan to attend the next one, and I will be learning. as I go. So, yes, I plan on attending those meetings. It's not like I will not be attending those meetings, and I plan to learn. And I actually have set up with the regional manager after the next HUSHRA meeting. I'll be getting a tour of the water plant to be able to see the treatment facility. So I will be attending those meetings.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Well, my take on what we were doing here tonight is that we're not actually carving something in stone. It's sort of a temporary, and this was just my take on it, was that it's a temporary situation until Mr. Schaefer can get his feet under him a little more, and then at some point we could change this around. I don't necessarily think this is something that Mr. Weed wants to necessarily have the duration of his term, but it seemed to me to make sense that you could attend the meetings along with them and get your feet, get oriented as what's going on with that board, and then at some point we can change it. I mean, this isn't carving in stone permanently. I really don't care one way or the other. Whether one goes as a primary or goes as an alternate, it's...
Right, yeah, I'm with you. Mr. Reed, Mr. Schaefer, did either of you consider how long you wanted to suggest this temporary position be this way?
I figured probably a year.
A year, okay.
Yeah. Unless another board member would like to fill the position.
Just asking.
I told you that on occasion, because Bob was the chairman and I was his alternate, they would throw me in and I had to run the meetings. And the world didn't come to an end. I mean, we actually, I was complimented a couple times on, well, you did that pretty good for a stranger or something. When I said, well, my comment was, I'm only here for the donuts. They have real good. But it certainly didn't take me a year to learn how to do that. And
okay.
That's excessive, I think. So. But, I mean, if the board really thinks this change is necessary, and all three of the other entities are going to have rookies in there, and they're confident of their guy, if the board thinks that we need to change this, then I agree kind of with Bill that we ought to set a time.
It sounds to me like you're driving at something else.
And it would be less than a year. So I just don't understand the need for a change. I mean, we're paying Dave a good salary. He can do these meetings once a month. And that's my feeling.
All right, any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve Aaron Weed as the Township Primary HUSRA Board member and Dave Schaefer as Township Alternate to the HUSRA Board.
Any period of time or just indefinitely?
Indefinitely, until such time as
you
want to make a change. If Dave's comfortable in 6 months taking over, then that'd be fine. A year, whatever.
Is there support?
I guess I'll support it. I mean, I think I'd go one way or the other. It doesn't really matter. So that's fine.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings.
Just to weigh into this, I have not much of an opinion one way or the other. I see all the points being made. Just so that I don't vote quietly on an issue that's gone back and forth so many times, I'll share my thoughts. I don't feel it necessary to make the change. I think Mr. Schaefer could do it fine. I don't have an overwhelming notion one way or the other. I think I think there's a lot of discussion for something we've got bigger fish to fry. So we should just vote and move on, I suppose. But I definitely see a lot of the concerns, but
Okay.
Any other comments?
do you have any?
Like I said, any one of these board members can take this position. I'm merely making a recommendation to help progress move along. That was it. I think I made that pretty clear during a Friday's work session.
Yep.
And the board can choose whatever it is they want to do with this.
And I guess my reply is, I'm not looking for another board member, to do this. I would
If someone thinks I'm incompetent of doing the job, let me know.
No, not at all. I just think Mr. Schaefer is competent. I mean, the first meeting or so, and you will not have to be the chairman. You can just be one of the guys at the table.
Yep, we're already aware.
He can do that.
We're already aware. Any of the municipalities could be chair of the meetings. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
No.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
No.
Mr. Cummings,
Sure, yeah.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, sale of properties for Oscoda Ensemble Industrial Park.
So Lisa Sutton put a letter together for me, the Ensemble Superintendent, describing the recently approved sale of lots 35 and 36 in the Oscoda Ensemble Industrial Park. The agreement is also attached in your packet. The proceeds from these sales will be equally distributed between Oscoda and Ensemble Townships. The purchase prices for each of the lots is $4,000, and the Oscoda Township Board has already authorized the sale, but this transaction also requires the approval of the Oscoda Township Board. And based on our previous work session, I provided supplemental information with the inventory of the plots in the industrial park that was provided by the Superintendent Sutton.
Comments?
So we have 3 more parcels that we're partners on after the sale of these 2?
Correct.
Interesting.
They're co-owners.
Never knew that.
Yeah, right.
I have a question. I'd like to know if, I guess, to start, the buyer is intended use for this. I found in the newspaper over the radio is a medical marijuana facility. Is that correct? Anyone confirm that?
Nope.
That is not?
I don't know.
Okay, all right. So I found out by way of the paper, which I wouldn't expect anything else. We don't usually find end use of things when we purchase them. But knowing that, since I do know that, I can't unknow that, I wonder if, I would be interested to know if there's any legal ramifications to the township being party to that type of business. I'd like to find an answer on that.
How are we party to that type of business?
Party in what way?
We were engaging in a business transaction with a company that sells marijuana.
Are they violating an ordinance or a law?
None of ours. The reason I'm not speaking on this in knowledge and asking to be informed is because I do not have the knowledge of those things. That's the very thing I'm trying to find out. So I cannot answer that question. I'd like to know if there are any federal laws or any reasons we need to be cautious or concerned.
As long as they're not violating any laws or ordinances that we have, really it's irrelevant what they do. It's a matter of them complying with whatever the Ensemble Planning Board requires, or whatever Ensemble Township requires.
Certainly not concerned about. I recognize the point.
So they
Obviously,
could buy the property with the
locally.
intent of putting a marijuana facility on it, and then in the process of trying to get it established, they could find out, oh, nope, it's not allowed in here, but that's beyond the sale of a property.
True, understood. I still would like to be informed by, I guess, the attorney, someone other than this person on this board, I suppose. So whether I need board authorization to ask that question of the attorney, or if it can be asked on my behalf in relation to him, something I'd be interested to learn.
I am good with any board member consulting our attorney for any questions they have. Does anybody disagree with that?
No, and he's generally more than open to, he enjoys having us call him and speak with him on virtually any matter.
I do not feel as comfortable doing that without sanctioning of the board. So if you just entertain my own personal wanting to notify the board before that, that's the approach I'd prefer to take.
Do you want to make a motion on that then?
If it's required, I'm satisfied with just notifying. If you guys feel the board feels a need to make a motion, that's fine with me. So to answer your question, no, I don't care to make a motion on it. My conscience is fine notifying you. That'll be having the discussion. So.
He'd be happy to talk to you.
All right, good to know. I'll tell him. You said that. So, I know that probably sounds obscure and crazy to all of you, but.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
It's,
All right,
it's quite all right.
very good.
Okay, any other comments? Is there a motion?
Let me ask a clarifying question then, Mr. Reed. Hold on. Mr. Nardine, would you prefer us table this then, so you can get that clarified? I'm just wondering if that's how you'd like to. I feel awkward
Sure.
making a motion
appreciate
after
that.
this conversation.
I'll be voting no.
Okay.
Until I get further clarification. If any of you feel the need to get further clarification yourselves, feel free to table it. But if you're equipped, don't wait on my account.
Okay.
I appreciate you asking, though.
Fair enough. Sure.
Well, I think that the important point here is this is just a sale of property. What happens to that property after the sale then comes under the jurisdiction of the township and the planning commission and those kinds of things. So we have to agree, and apparently Oscoda, their board has already approved the sale. They're simply asking for us to do the same. So I would make a motion that we approve the sale of lots 35 and 36 in the Oscoda Oscoda Industrial Park for the price of $4,000 per lot.
Or.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
No.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. Motion is passed. In case any board members are unaware, we do have a legal meeting every Monday prior to a board meeting, not the Monday of the board meeting, but the Monday prior to a board meeting at 2 p.m. So if for some reason you're uneasy contacting our attorney on your own, you may come to that meeting or provide questions so that it can be asked at that meeting.
Good to know.
We can respond then.
Very good.
For the time being, they're actually every Monday until we get things settled in.
Cool. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Well, I knew of the meeting, but I appreciate the clarification on the ability to weigh in. They're every week until things settle in with the transition superintendent, is that?
Correct.
Very good.
Is that an official invite to all of us, all board members?
You can only have 3 at the most at one time, so
Okay.
No, Bill, you have to bring donuts.
we'll have to probably do a little coordination if you guys get legally excited here.
All right.
But I am all in favor of board members getting legal input.
Yeah,
The more educated we are on the laws, the more effective we can be.
I agree.
Does anybody feel maybe we should wait here for a few minutes for Mr. Byer to return, or should we
Yes, let's
continue?
pause, please.
Also, it's just turned past 9:30.
We have to make a motion to continue.
All right. Do you want to proceed with that?
I'll make a motion that we move forward with the board meeting to finish it after the 9:30 time cut off.
Mr. Byer was just taking a phone call that he thought was critical. So.
Oh, probably.
I'll support the motion and note that we need unanimous approval. So,
That we need to what?
we need unanimous approval.
Okay.
We find ourselves stalled.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion by Ms. McGuire, support from Mr. Nordine. We're on hold for the return of Mr. Byer.
Can I share my computer? I know, right? I know.
Mr. Lee, would the
Sorry.
lawyer invitation also go out
It's
to
not
any other?
a touch screen.
For planning and ZBA boards.
Yes.
I would also like to coordinate a zoning administrator attorney meetings so that the information is conveyed directly rather than interpreted.
Mine's not great either. My battery is dying, and so
We have some questions
plug
about
it in pretty often.
issues right now.
Charge your battery.
Advice on
Yeah. It'd be good have you guys scheduled an attorney meeting at all?
I don't see it on the Wi-Fi.
especially for us. Planning.
You said that.
Yeah, I think it's on the side.
While we're taking a little break, or we're still live, right?
Yes,
I
think
will
so.
just mention that the summer tax bills are in the process of being stuffed and mailed. They go out July 1st and they're due on September 14th. If you have any questions or want a copy or want to see it, should be available online, or you can stop in our office at any time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good idea for adding that. I would like to know for anybody, or say for anybody watching regarding Old Orchard Park, for the comments made previously. Old Orchard Park is governed by both Consumers Energy and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So most of what Old Orchard has to comply with there is really out of our hands. But we'll look into the communication issue that you had talked about and see what we can do there.
Mr. Weed, before we proceed, I just want to, for the board's sake and the audience, Mr. Gajewski's having trouble with his computer, so I'm sharing my computer with him so he can follow along in the board packet.
Here's a copy of the agenda on paper if you'd like it.
Thank you.
What I doodled on first.
Second? Great.
All right, so we have a motion for continuing the meeting past the 9:30 time by Ms. McGuire and support by Mr. Nordine. We have roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer.
Should I vote? Had to step out.
It's a
We paused
unanimous.
for you.
Yeah.
If you want to
Has to
proceed.
be.
Waited for.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion is passed. We are now in overtime.
Yes.
All right, so sale of properties is complete. We're now on to engineering for emergency community water assistant grants through the USDA Rural Development Service.
All right, so the Emergency Community Water Assistance Grant is ECWAG, and you will see an email from June 20th from Rick Freeman, the engineer, the township's engineer of record, and the township's original engineering agreement for the Phase 1 water main extension contains language that requires board approval to move to the application process. So we do have Mr. Freeman here this evening, who attended the board meeting, and if anybody has any questions regarding that and why we are moving forward in that, he is here to answer all of your questions.
Any comments?
You picked a good one to attend.
Exactly.
Nice summer night.
Yes.
Getting your money's worth.
So this project deals with the $1 million that the USDA has for expanding our municipal water system. And we have to apply for this. Of course, anybody can apply for it, but we're trying to get the $1 million so we can extend our water mains a little further through the contaminated area where there's a lot of residential wells.
Okay.
Any other comments?
This is what we've been calling Phase 2.
This is Phase 2.
Yes.
And just, again, further clarification, so Mr. Freeman is helping us with the grant, helping us get
Correct.
the grants in place to fund that Phase 2 project.
Correct.
Very good. And currently, what are we anticipating Phase 2 will cost that we're looking for grant funding for?
It will cost $1.6 million, and then an additional $600,000 for service leads to get to the homes. But federal funds cannot be used for that, so we have to try and get those additional funds, hopefully either through the state. Ideally, the Air Force would pay for it, but we've seen how that's gone over the last few years.
Let's not hold our breath there, right? Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Well, it just should be, I don't know if everyone remembers, but the state has come through with $300,000 for Oscoda Township for service lines for Phase 1. So I don't think it's unreasonable to think that perhaps the state possibly could come through with some more money for the service line hookups for Phase 2.
And am I right, we're getting no federal money? Yes, no?
This $1 million is federal.
Is federal, that's, okay, yes. All right.
Is there a motion?
I'll move to authorize Rowe Engineering to perform the application process associated with the Emergency Community Water Assistance Grant through the USDA Rural Development Service.
I'll support it. Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call?
Can we put in there somewhere that it's recognizing Phase 2 instead of Phase 1 because we have all these different phases going on? So that it can, that way if it's ever have to go back in the minutes, people can recognize it.
Through the minutes?
Yes.
Associated with Phase
Right.
2?
Yep.
Can you make note of it?
I'll add
Please.
that to my motion that this is for Phase 2 of the water main extension
Thank you.
project.
Support. Oh, sorry. I tuned out.
Roll call?
It's after 9:30.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed. Next, for the notice of intent for the ECWAG USDA Rural Development Service Grant.
Right, so on that same email from the 20th of June from Mr. Freeman, the notice of intent is linked to the previous item that was just passed. So the board must authorize the publication of the notice of intent to apply for the funding through ECWAG, the USDA Rural Development Service. The notice of intent was put together by Mr. Freeman, and he is here if anybody has any questions about this next step.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we authorize the publication of the notice of intent for ECWAG USDA Rural Development Service through Rowe concerning Phase 2.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Gasky?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed. Next, storm sewer ordinance and rate structure.
Right, so in the supplemental information that I provided you to this evening, it is the updated storm sewer ordinance, as well as the rate structure associated with the processed water. So this was provided as an update to the storm sewer with detailed calculations on how that will be billed.
Any comments?
What kind of timeline do we have with this?
Very short.
Thought so.
This also correlates with construction of the granulated activated carbon plant.
I ask because having received it at 3:30 and with us having closed session at 5:30,
Yes, I
I've
understand.
read it about as well as I can read it in those 2 hours while trying to fulfill other responsibilities and such. So I have read it, but I would, if more time were available, I would be anxious to get it, if that's an option.
I actually didn't have time to read it.
What is the deadline?
So do you want to table this and have a special meeting?
Don't know what kind of.
When do we, what is the deadline? When do we actually?
Postpone it? It needs to be ASAP.
What does that mean?
That means
Is it
like
tonight only, or?
we need it probably within a few days.
I see. Oh,
Is everybody else comfortable with it? Had time to review it?
I did actually have a chance to review this one.
Yeah, I've had a chance to review it, and I would also say that the rate structure was very well done by Mr. Freeman of Roy Engineering. I was very impressed with the systematic way they came about
I agree.
the cost for the system. I think it's a reasonable cost and was very well prepared.
I concur.
And I don't know if you're able, if the biggest components there, section 6 is the types of fees to be charged. And on there, we are providing a detailed methodology with rationale so that they understand precisely how we're coming up with these figures. And we are using a, 10% capacity.
Right.
So what we're actually factoring in there for our charge as far as ready-to-serve fee component is very reasonable. If you look at the other as far as the consumption, that is obviously a little bit more. However, the units that they are putting through with the processed water for what we're actually asking for on a monthly basis is reasonable.
It's reasonable.
Yeah, they're talking about 500,000 gallons a day, roughly, was based on, I think, because that was based on.
Correct,
Yeah.
from one plant at this time.
Right.
With the option that they could add 2 more plants.
Right.
And this ordinance is written that it applies to any entity that is putting processed water through our storm sewer system. Most municipalities will also include rates that come from rainfall that comes off, sheds off of roofs and parking lots. But we have not extended it to that level unless the board chooses to do so.
That was a discussion from last Friday's work session where we talked about it being God water. That's a common terminology for rain or water that comes from above. Yeah, so, no, I don't think my opinion would be, I would like to see us consider it, but I wouldn't want to hold this up given our need to have an unbiased document for the Air Force, something that they can't come back later and say that we've selected them out and treated them unfairly. I feel that this document has been very well written and it does not do that. And so I think it serves the purpose which we're looking for it to fulfill right now, given the urgency of the matter.
And this is something Township should have had in place a long time ago to cover the long-term expenses on this system.
And the Air Force has or has not seen a draft copy of this at all?
I saw a draft that was created in November,
Okay. So,
which is almost identical to this one.
lacking just pricing, is that correct? And feedback at that time, was there any?
They were not willing to provide feedback, and their attorney said they didn't even want to see the ordinance until this board had approved it.
And have we gotten a date from the Air Force about when they need it by?
Do not have a firm date.
Underneath section 7, item C, is there any training that's going to be involved with that to enforce this ordinance if they find a violation?
Was there any what?
Training.
Training involved, who's going to, if they find a violation, how do we know it's a violation? Is somebody going to be trained to identify that?
Right now, we have the DEQ monitoring it.
Oh, it's going to be a DEQ.
They're not going to enforce our ordinance though, correct?
And they're not going to enforce it, or we would enforce it, but we can get data from the DEQ.
We can get it from the DEQ?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Question.
And this is intended to,
And periodically, we can hire a service to come out and take a sample and do the testing.
Okay.
this is intended towards regulating processed water.
Correct.
Correct? So, in the section 3, paragraph A, it says, shall be unlawful for him to dump or discharge, otherwise released in the township, sanitary sewer infrastructure. Is that intended to be there, sanitary?
You are correct. That is it should not say sanitary, that should say storm.
Okay, and then my question was actually in a different portion. Any liquid material, unless it is a result of precipitation, snow melt, other naturally occurring event, any additional discharge other than the event set forth immediately above shall be unlawful. Does that leave room for something other than processed water? See, like a garden hose? You see what I'm? My question?
This is for continuous flow.
Continuous flow. Okay. Okay.
There is a term in here regarding continuous flow.
Section 5, number 4.
Okay, so, I was trying to reconcile that statement I read just a moment ago with this checklist of if any one of these things comes off, checks the box, then this comes into effect, is my understanding. I was having trouble reconciling the concept. But if it's as intended, then...
So if somebody leaves their garden hose on for a month, yeah, they need to get billed for that.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not contradicting ourselves in section 3 versus section 5, is my concern. That our intent is to go after processed water, and that down the road someone will point out this is not as cleanly as applicable as we intended it to be, and leave a loophole is my concern.
Does the board feel prepared to vote on this now, after this discussion and review?
Torn. I don't usually vote on things that I haven't read to this degree, so my answer, I think, is no, personally.
Right. How do we reconcile the need, though, is my concern. I'm trying to find a way through this.
Sure, if the rest of the board is prepared, but again, I'm not directing anything here, I'm just...
No, fair enough.
Like I said, we can postpone and have a special meeting.
So your chances of getting everybody together for that are pretty limited, probably, with the holiday coming up.
Right.
And I think to the point it needs to be sooner than that anyway, doesn't it?
Yes, I think so.
I'm comfortable with voting on it tonight with that, making that one correction in it where it refers to sanitary sewer. Because I think what we have to remember is this still has to be approved by the Air Force. So we're putting something together to present to the Air Force, and they may send it back and we may have to look at it again.
Are we open to that?
To what?
To them rewriting our ordinance?
It would depend on what they have to say about it.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Cross that bridge.
I got something to say.
That's why I was hoping to gain input from them sooner when I gave them the draft in November. But like I said, they didn't even want to touch it.
Yeah.
Because until we vote on it, it's not official, so they can't
Right.
say anything.
Well, it's my evaluation of the situation then that we have to do something with it tonight, to the point of Ms. McGuire's observation. We're not likely going to get everybody together in the time remaining. We can't wait until after the holiday. We can't even really wait up to the holiday. So I'm just going to throw a motion out there, and we'll see who's willing to put a vote. So I move that we approve the storm sewer ordinance and the rate structure as presented with the modification, removing that word sanitary and replacing the word storm, and revoking all previously implemented storm sewer ordinances or policies.
I would support that.
All right.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
I'm gonna vote yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion is passed. You gonna assign a number to that tomorrow?
Yes.
Next, resolution and ordinances. Resolution 2018-15, location of food trucks on township property. Any comments? We did clarify that Riverbend Park was not included because of the tight space. It was deemed that it could be a safety issue unless we make some improvements to the park.
I see. So as such, it's excluded and therefore not, it doesn't qualify for this, for permitting or for a food truck in that location.
Correct.
Got it.
The only space we found available was right near the drive where you come in, and after reviewing it, we thought that might block the view of traffic coming in and out of if you're coming in and out of the park. So
I see.
we opted to just leave Riverbank Park off the list.
When did we do this? I don't disagree with it, but when did we do this, 2 weeks ago, or was this a Friday morning? When
this,
to leave the Riverbend Park of the 5 parks off the.
It was a question that was raised during the Friday morning work session.
Okay.
So question was raised Friday morning as to was Riverbend Bank left off intentionally or mistakenly? And Mr. Palmer and Mr. Weed are indicating that when they say we left it off or we went back and reevaluated, they mean the planning commission or the subcommittee
Yes.
or?
Yeah, the planning commission.
So not we, the board, made
No,
this decision?
Right.
Thank you.
Makes a
Sorry,
difference.
yeah.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2018-15.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2018-16, avoiding previous practice of real estate commissions. Any comments?
This does not include our current real estate agent,
Correct.
because don't give us no date.
No, the two paragraphs of whereas on page 1, I think clarifies the question, yes or no? Right here.
Stating just one agent. What's the date on
The date on, yeah, not the computer. The date on which?
that? Yeah.
What-
What is that?
It's going to be filled in.
It's got to be filled, so it's June of this year.
It'll be June of this year, whenever
Okay.
we sign this in.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve resolution 2018-16, rescinding all previous real estate commission policies prior to our Real Estate One agreement.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gieske.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's approved. Next resolution, 2018-17, appointing Oscoda Wordsmith Airport LDFA trustee. So, Miss Lisa Sutton served on the LDFA for the term prior to this one. As a representative from the Asable Oscoda Chamber of Commerce. And the feedback is she served well. And so we'd like to continue with her being a member on the LDFA. And I think it would also be good to have an Asable representative on that board also.
And she's willing to serve?
Yes.
Good.
Totally agree. I move that we adopt resolution 2018-17.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, DDA board member resignation.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
If I can interrupt, I believe, and I can't cite the law, but I believe that there is a state regulation that if township board meetings go beyond 10 o'clock, the board has to recognize that it is 10 o'clock and they want to continue. We have,
It's 9:30 and we did that. That's what you voted yes to.
oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Is it
why I
9?
said, just say
Did it
yes.
change 9?
Yes.
Was it 10 ever?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right, okay. Yeah, I remember you, I was out, and I said, I maybe shouldn't vote on this, and you said, it's gotta be unanimous, so, okay, yes.
I'll just say that from now on. We're good. Just kidding.
No,
Just kidding, Jim.
no, I'm fine, I'm totally fine. I really didn't think I should vote on that if I was in a different room, but that's
That's all it
okay.
was.
All right. I apologize for the interruption.
All right, DDA board member resignation. In our last board meeting, if you recall, they brought up that there was a resignation letter for this position that was sent out on May 11th. And so now it is in our hands. So I make a motion that we accept the resignation from Andrea Mosley from the DDA board.
I support, though it was without comment here, and again, I'm going to throw in my comment after my support, that the specific call from the audience by Mr. Maxwell, who is the chairman of the DDA, specifically called your statement a lie, that you, when you said that there was no resignation, but in fact, this document was then presented later without anyone's knowledge that it existed at the time of that board meeting, last board meeting, our board meeting here. I don't understand why that was done, and I just wanted to call that out and say I don't understand why that was done. I think it's confusing and I don't know, bizarre. So.
I agree. I wish I'd been notified prior to that board meeting. Is there support for the motion?
Support.
Motion by,
Oh, I did actually support it already.
oh, sorry. Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Thank you.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. We're into our second public comment period. There's a 4-minute time limit. Anyone may speak. You don't have to have a card. When you come to the podium, please introduce yourselves. However, I do think we had somebody that called dibs the first on this one.
Yes.
I have Sharon Vazina for the power outlets / more transparency.
She might
I
have
think
left.
they left.
She's off.
That was regarding what subject?
Power outlets / more transparency.
I bet it has to do with a park would be my guess.
Would that be Old Orchard?
Yes.
All right, anybody else wish to speak? Yes.
Robert Tazier, Hillcrest Drive, Oscoda resident. Maybe it's because it's been a long day and I'm a little cranky. And you all know me, I'm kind of outspoken anyways. I just gotta say that tonight, it bothers me a little bit that with the amount of discussion, I'm talking about the Hersha appointment for the water thing. With the amount of discussions being taken place about our water issues, contamination. We hear it all the time. We're all involved in it. I feel we need a highly qualified person in that position, and I'm glad that Mr. Weed is going to be that person because I think he's one of the most qualified people when it comes to dealing with these water contamination issues for knowledge to sit on that board. I personally, I don't appreciate the topic of our water being taken lightly, and that's the way I took it tonight. I don't want to get involved in any politicized or even personal things that I seen it happening tonight, and I don't like that. I think this board needs to be working for the community in all aspects. You need to get over these issues. If you have problems on your board, then handle it. Get over it. Because it's affecting this community, and I'm mad about it. Get over it. Whatever issues you have, it's not doing the community any good by nitpicking these type of issues. I take exception to that. That was a very important issue that's all we've been talking about. We got restoration advisory boards. We got a now activist committee. We've got all of these things dealing with our water, and you're arguing about who's qualified. It wasn't even who's qualified to sit on that board. We need qualified people to address these water issues. This is the biggest impact in our community right there. And I'm sorry that, like I said, I'm probably cranky and that's how I'm come out. So that's all I have to say.
Anybody else wish to speak?
Connie LaRich, Oscoda resident, Westwood Drive, and also the community co-chair of the Restoration Advisory Board. I'm all for whatever it takes the board and the township to improve and get the Air Force or any other responsible party to clean up our contamination in the town. I'm all for that. A couple of quick questions. The 2 easements or access agreements that you have in front of you, but I have not been able to find them. Are they published? Are they, the first one was the final, the one that the airport authority had to co-sign a while ago. So where was it published? Was it in one of the meetings, agendas, or somewhere else?
Yeah, I think it was in our packet from last meeting. Yeah,
last
that was
meeting.
in there. This one was late because we were working hard to get this done, but...
You're talking about the ordinance.
The ordinance, you're
Oh, I'm
welcome
not
to
talking
have
about
it.
that one,
the
yeah.
easement, the GAC easement.
I'm talking about the one that was finalized that the airport signed, and then it was approved, but I haven't been able to find it in that, so I'll have to look closer than that. The storm sewer access agreement, what's the status of that? Because that's on the agenda, but I didn't hear any particulars about it. Is it final by the board?
So we just voted on
That was last.
On the access agreement? The storm sewer access.
This will work with them for putting in the manhole and utilizing our storm sewer.
Well, that's an ordinance, yes, but I'm talking about the actual agreement. Has it been sent to the Air Force? Is it final as an access agreement?
Yeah.
There is a land access agreement that has to be worked out, but that does not affect their storm sewer connection.
Okay. I'm still a little confused on that one, but that's not the first time. That's a personal comment to myself, not to you guys. Okay, on the ordinance and the fee structure, was the one in November, was that a final ordinance that was final and adopted by the board in November last year?
No.
No, it wasn't. Okay. So you are passing today, your vote was an ordinance with amended the draft with a fee structure. Okay. Is the ordinance in the packet that went out?
No, that was late today. It's right here. You can have a copy.
Okay, so the public hasn't seen it. Okay. Has business seen it? Has business had an opportunity to look at it? Because this applies to all businesses, current and future, if they want to do something about processed water. How is the township giving the current and potential future and economic development of our area a chance to provide comment? And I want to repeat, I'm not trying to put a block on this because I want to stop contaminated water going from the stormwater into Van Etten Creek. It's 4 years too late because of the Air Force and the DEQ playing games with it. And I'll be honest, and I've said it to both of them. So I'm all for something to make it happen, but have we given the business a chance to see this or even think about it? So, okay. So I'm not going to get an answer on that, but I think...
No, the answer is no on that, but I thought you were going to continue on with something.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
No, my 4 minutes is up.
All right. Anybody else? All right, then we're on to board comments.
I do have one, and I wanted to do a call out, an appreciation to Susan Menente from the DHHS. On May 30th, she had provided an email. It was a requested fact sheet, a fact sheet that I had asked her specifically for, representing a number of businesses, resorts in the community. Nearly 2 years ago, when we had an open house, she was presenting the fact sheet that is a one-page fact sheet with some points about PFAS in the Oscoda area. She had provided some copies of this fact sheet, preliminary, copied off on her own printer, mailed to me, and then I delivered them to the Township Hall where they are publicly available. We'll be getting more. We'll be getting more copies in the future after she gets them, quote-unquote, professionally printed. But I wanted to call out that was something delivered that I thought was a much needed and wanted document that we could provide people who are asking our resorts and businesses questions. I also wanted to say that there is since we're trying not to call it a town hall meeting, it is the informational, exactly, now what are we calling it instead? It is an informational, PFAS informational opportunity from 2 to 4 at Sacred Heart Catholic Church. And then, once again, we're then having the committee or the board, I'm sorry, it's getting late and I'm losing my ability to speak here. It is where there's going to be a panel discussion. Again, at Sacred Heart on this Wednesday, the 27th, from 6 to 8. So both of those events are at Sacred Heart this Wednesday coming up, all regarding PFAS.
Any others? All right, hearing none.
I've got one, yes. Much appreciated. The absentee ballots ballots are available in our office for absentee voters, so if any voters are interested in absentee ballots, they can fill out an application, and we can get the ballots out to you when you return the application to vote.
I know it's late, but on the 14th of May, the Oscoda Township Board approved Resolution 2018-10, proposing ballot language for the police millage on the August 7th election. The Township Board is proposing a total of 1.5 mills dedicated to fund the police department for 6 years. The first year the millage is levied, the board approved 1.5 mills are projected to generate $435,000. The board approved ballot language is very specific on exactly how that money will support the police department. The board-approved ballot language states that community service officer / code compliance officer would be added to the police department. This board-approved ballot language translates into dedicated community service officer to be stationed at the school while classes are in session, and the community service officer would enforce code compliance when the school is not in session. The board-approved ballot language states that a detective sergeant position would be added to the police department. The board-approved ballot language translates into a dedicated detective sergeant position to add manpower to perform police investigations without taking an officer off the road patrols and responding to complaints. The board-approved ballot language translates into dedicated funding to get the township's police department in the 21st century. This dedicated funding would allow the police department to purchase technology such as mobile data terminals, or MDTs, for cruisers, upgrade computer network technologies to support those MDTs, and upgrade communications equipment / radios to improve safety forces equipment. I got to ride along with the police department last Thursday night, the 21st, and I want to thank Chief David, Officer Sobolewski, and Officer Gallagher for the opportunity to ride along and witness what they do and how they do it.
Very cool.
Anything else? All right, then I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.